Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed a great holiday season. My name is Lorraine Rodriguez Bonilla, and I am the research horticulturist working on peach rootstock development with USDA ARS at Byron. Even though I couldn't be in person with you all today, I hope you find this presentation informative. At the end, I will leave my email address in case anyone has any comments or questions that they would like to send my way. The title of my talk today is "From the Ground Up: Incorporating Molecular Tools for Peach Rootstock Improvement in the Southeast." This presentation is going to be a summary of some of the work that we have started doing this past year and what are some things to come. I want to provide an overview of the presentation today. I'm going to start with a brief introduction about the topics that we're going to be discussing today, then go on and talk about what I see as the program goals. I want to go a little bit into breeding, what are the different types of breeding that were in the program versus what we want to do. Then talk a little bit about what are the areas of focus that we have, as well as what those future goals are going to be based off our focus areas. As an introduction, in tree fruit production, rootstocks play an invaluable role in both management and efficiency of an orchard. They can influence yield, architecture, disease resistance, and crop load, amongst other important traits. In crops such as apple, they have changed the whole industry, while other industries such as pear struggle to move on due to the lack of rootstocks available. Even though there has been progress made in peach rootstock development, the process is still considerably slow when compared to Scion cultivar development. This, in part, is due to the long testing periods required to ensure that rootstocks have a consistent and desirable performance. These rootstocks are tested for many years in order to evaluate that their performance against environmental threats and their longevity is consistent and good before they can be sent out to nurseries and growers. In peaches, rootstock provide the much needed protection against pests and pathogens such as armillaria, root knot nematodes, PTSL, amongst others. Guardian, which is a peach seedling rootstock that was released in 1993 by USDA and Clemson, has addressed a lot of those issues when it comes to root rot nematodes and peach tree short life, which was a big issue when it was released. However, other issues such as armillaria root rot and other root rot nematodes for which Guardian is highly susceptible have driven the need for new materials in order to be able to address these issues. Newer rootstocks such as MP29, which is a clonally propagated plum peach hybrid, have demonstrated resistance to armillaria, PTSL, and root rot nematode, including floridensis. Not only is MP29 a very disease-resistant rootstock, it also affects vigor. It's being considered as a semi-dwarfing rootstock, which is a highly desirable trait if we think of high-density orchard planning, as things have been moving in other industries like apple. However, the clonal nature of this rootstock has stalled its potential distribution and impact. Doing tissue culture propagation, it's a very lengthy process. It requires a lot of sanitary restrictions. Being able to produce the material without contamination is very important. Not to think also about the energy costs and such that are required to maintain everything from incubators to the hoods and other things. Our rootstock, at almost the end of the pipeline, is B22, which has been produced in collaboration by USDA, ARS, UGA, and UF, and for which Dr. Beckman is going to be talking to you today, has also some of that disease resistance, but then the benefit that it is a seed propagated rootstock. Even though there has been great success in the development of rootstock materials in peach, today there is a lack of molecular tools being used to accelerate the breeding and selection cycles. There is a big need to genetically characterize and understand plant pedigrees and backgrounds at the molecular level. We still have a lot to do in terms of trials, but incorporating these molecular tools can help expedite the breeding process, which is also a lengthy process. If we think about the difference between conventional and molecular breeding, let's say we have two parents, both have desirable traits. The one in yellow is disease resistant but low yielding, while the one in purple is high yielding but more vulnerable to disease. We make these crosses and get our first generation of seeds and seedlings. We then get our seeds and then we can screen our progeny, but we might not get our desired product still. So we need to continue to make crosses and many crosses, different generations, and eventually, after many crosses, we're going to be able to observe our desired product. When we think about molecular breeding, we are still doing crosses between the parents that we are interested in obtaining traits. We're still going to germinate our seed and our seedlings. With the help of molecular markers, which I will go over in a minute, we can facilitate the screening of those seedlings. Markers can be associated to a certain trait or a certain gene of interest, and with this in mind, once we germinate our seedlings, we can obtain the DNA, screen for that trait, select the seedlings we want, and then discard the rest. Using molecular tools, we are able to find our desirable phenotype in a shorter amount of time, and also it's a lot more cost effective than having to plant a lot of plants to evaluate and continue to evaluate year after year. And this is when incorporating molecular tools into breeding programs can become a powerful and useful tool. With this in mind, I want to go over what I consider are some of our program goals. First of all, to evaluate, characterize, and utilize the germplasm available. We have a big collection that Dr. Beckman did a magnificent work being able to gather all of those materials. And still, we need to collect new germplasm. This is a way that we can obtain what we can describe as a library of useful traits to breed with. Then is also the utilization and development of genetic tools that can help us facilitate breeding decisions. Gladly, Dr. Chung-Chan Chen has developed many genetic tools in-house that we can work with to screen our materials. Then is also the establishment of assays and protocols that can help us accelerate trait discovery, either it be accelerated disease screening, doing it in vitro in the greenhouse rather than waiting to go to the field, and then to be able to evaluate and develop new materials that will positively impact growers, producers, nurseries, all the industry in general. With this, our ultimate goal would be to develop rootstock materials that exhibit disease resistance, desirable architecture, are adaptable to climate change, all of this while using lower inputs. And of course, as a program, as working with plants is, it's going to be very dynamic. This might be the focus in the first 5 years, but that can definitely be something that evolves organically throughout time. I have broken down our program in 3 areas of focus: the genomic, phenotypic, and breeding, and areas underneath that we can work with. However, all of these areas are all under germplasm because, again, without the plant material to mine for traits, we don't really have anything else. We need that material. We need to be able to understand that material so that we can utilize other tools to help us move forward in the program. Although we have a collection of plant material of different prunus at USDA and historical information of their pedigree and origin, um, we also have morphological data and disease resistance, chill requirements, bloom density, but we do lack molecular data that can allow us to fingerprint and correctly identify the materials we have, as well as helping us being more efficient in the way that we maintain our field, the amount of labor that has to go. Let's say we have 25 clones of the same plant. We do not need 25 clones at the same time on the field. So that will reduce labor cost, the amount of time that we spend working with these materials, as well as in general just being more efficient with the work that we're able to do. Talking a little bit now about the genomics area, and we're going to be focusing on molecular markers and eventually in the future in sequencing and gene expression. But for now, I'm going to focus on molecular markers. And molecular markers, there are many, many molecular markers. If you think of a road and you see all of these posts on the road that tell you this is where exit X is, think of markers as that same way. These are tools that we can use, find in the genome, and use them as a guide to understand where our traits are so that we can be more efficient when we're screening our plant material. A lot of these markers are in highly conserved regions of the genome among species, meaning I can compare peaches with plums and others that are closely related. Also, they can help us understand and analyze genetic relationships. So think of this as similar to a paternity test. One of the most commonly used and affordable markers that have been used for many, many years are SSR markers or simple sequence repeats. As I mentioned, these markers can give us a visual profile of the genetic information of individuals. They are low cost, highly reproducible, meaning the work that I do here with some markers, someone else uses the same markers, they should be able to get similar, if not the same results. And they have been, again, extensively studied. Depending on the number of repeats of these markers, we will have different patterns that are going to be able to help us discern between individuals. Let's say, for example, that we have CA is our repeat, this is our marker, and CA it's being repeated several times. Different individuals are going to have different copies and different number of copies of the CA allele. When we look at it visually, we can see that different individuals have different combinations. If, for example, let's say we want to identify the parentage of some trees or some hybrids, some crosses that we made. Let's say DNA2 and DNA4 are our parents of DNA3. We see that DNA3 shares an allele that was inherited from each parent. This is because of the codominant nature of the markers. So here we have the marker that is shared with DNA2, and then here the one that is shared with DNA4. Therefore, we could say that this hybrid is the progeny of these two. But this is not something that we do only in one marker. We do this with over 20 markers, and then across that number of markers, we get the information that we need to discern amongst samples. In-house, Dr. Chen worked on developing two sets of markers that have been used by him in several different projects. He has a total of 28 SSR markers that cover different regions in the genome. He has utilized these markers to analyze genetic relationships and parentage of historical peach accessions and cultivars. We were able to do some work with Dr. Chen and Dr. Beckman with the goal of having an assessment of some prunus rootstocks that are at the station using these markers to see if we could find clones, how did the different species grouped or not grouped together. And the markers were extremely useful identifying clones, as it was here in the example of sharp A, B, and C. We were also able to see similar results when we looked at Tennessee 2, 1, and 3, and it was also useful to separate amongst plums, peaches, and almonds hybrids. This paper is in the process of being published, and we are looking forward to using these markers in other projects. The dots in red talk show the areas that we have started working on in this past year. Right now, we have collected over 1,500 leaf samples to genetically characterize the plant material that's growing in our plots, and we have also been able to continue Dr. Beckman's great work in the areas of evaluation and making new crosses for new rootstocks as well. And all of this goes to our future goals, having these focus areas in mind. As some of our future goals, again, we would like to obtain new plant material to broaden the genetic diversity, those tools that we're going to have in hand to obtain resistance, to obtain architecture. We're looking to do this by collaborating on plant expedition, utilizing the resources that are available at the National Germplasm Repository. We want to be able to start building collaborations to do material exchange with them. We also want to be able to understand and guard the resources that we have on station. We want to continue to characterize the materials at Byron. We want to establish an in vitro seed collection with the purpose of backing up these materials, because we all know that sometimes things die, but we want to be able to have a backup in case something happens. We want to be able to do phenotyping work, develop bioassays, and testing for disease resistance at the seedling stage, just to facilitate selections and try to somehow move faster the clock and the different cycles of breeding. We would like to, focus a little bit more on how can we understand better diseases such as phony peach and armillaria, using different technologies such as hyperspectral imaging so that we can detect infections early on. And that's going to be very important. In terms of the genomic work, we would like to develop new markers that can allow us to do more fine trait association using different types of markers such as single nucleotide polymorphisms. When we were talking about SSRs, I mentioned these are repeats in tandem, and then this is more to the base point. We also want to be able to sequence genomes to better understand evolution of traits, evolution of the plant material, because that can give us information of how these plants are related to one another, and maybe we should be crossing plants that maybe we haven't thought of crossing before. We also want to be able to characterize gene function and expression. Let's say we do disease resistance, we inoculate plants to see how disease progresses, and we want to understand which genes are turning up or turning down during infection. That can tell us a lot of the biology of the plant as well as the biological process of infection, and it can give us some insight in terms of like what are we going to do in terms of breeding if there are some plants or some selections that have a better response than others. We want to be able to understand trait expression and heritability of disease-resistant traits, as well as understand changes in microbiome and the chemical exudates related to resistant and susceptible rootstock genotypes. In terms of breeding and horticulture, we want to continue to make crosses to develop mapping populations that can allow us to obtain trait discovery and market association. For example, for increased resistance to armillaria and PTSL. We want to explore the usage of other peach wild relatives that can be grafting and cross-compatible amongst each other. We want to be able to plant crosses to select for rootstocks that positively influence science architecture in terms of plant height, branching, the amount of limbs, etc. Develop test plots to evaluate rootstock vigor and inputs in fruit quality and yield. So how much water, how much fertilizer with different rootstocks is going to give us a better yield of fruit, and not only that, but a tree that is able to withstand the crop load as well. We are looking forward to doing some testing and evaluation on interstems, as well as evaluating rootstocks in marginal soils, such as those with waterlogging or salinity issues. With that, I want to thank everyone for sitting here and listening to my presentation. I want to thank Dr. Beckman for being extremely helpful and helping me, guiding me my first year, as well as Dr. Jose Chaparro and Dr. Dario Chavez. Um, I want to thank also Dr. Jeff Cook for inviting me to speak to all of you today. To the Georgia Peach Council, the Southeastern Peach Industry, as well as the meeting for having me here today. I want to thank my team that has been extremely helpful and the only reason we got over this year. To Deb Mooney, Dr. Mike Hotchkiss, Stephen Hoy, and Courtney Vizquera, as well as Dr. Chen for all of his help, and everyone in the Byron Labs. Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to leave my email here. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to message me. I look forward to being able to meet all of you, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Okay, that was, for those of you who came in late, that was Dr. Lorraine Bonilla. She had to join us through a recorded session there. If you want to access that, if you missed part of it, you can get that at the education desk through their recordings. Next, we have Dr. Tom Beckman. He's going to be talking to us about his rootstock selection P22. And take me just a second to pull him up. Where you don't see it on there. Okay. Kind of hard for you. I don't know why.
So it won't give me a slide here to work
No,
from.
you kind of have to.
All right, I can do that. All right. Where to start? Okay, I'm going to be talking about P22. I talked about it 2 years ago here, but I'm somewhat embarrassed to say that not as much happened as I had hoped in the intervening time, but things have really started moving here this past year. So we are looking at a release for this fall. So I'm going to compare and contrast its performance over the years with its two most obvious competitors, that being Guardian foremost, then MT29, which I think you have to compare it to. And then I'm going to talk about some of the details in the upcoming release because there are still a few interesting little questions we dealt with. Which way to go? Okay. First, um, when we announced it, these are the characteristics we're touting for it. First and foremost, it's a peach seedling rootstock. It is not a clonal piece of material. It's essentially full size. It's a little smaller than Guardian. Think more Lovell or Helford size tree, but it's not profoundly different like MP29 is. It's very resistant to peach tree short life. We know you've got to have that. You can't release anything that doesn't have resistance to it. It's the first seedling piece of material that I've ever seen that was tolerant of armillaria. With that said, I don't want anybody to think that it's as good as MP29, and you'll see that in the data that I'm going to show you. But it's a big improvement over what Guardian represents to us. It's resistant to most root knot nematodes that you're going to be dealing with. First and foremost, the incognita, which is what you most commonly encounter in the main production areas. But it's also resistant to Floridensis, which is the nematode they're having a lot of trouble with in Florida. And it has good productivity and fruit size. So let's move on to some data. This is from a Clanton trial. It was established in 2012. This trial was actually critical to produce a lot of the yield data. I have to give a lot of thanks to Jim Pitts and now Matthew Price, who oversaw this trial, because I never imagined they would put the effort into doing the yield study that they did. I had good data from my trial at Byron, but nothing like what these guys generated. So I was really appreciative of that. We were comparing it to 3 other rootstocks, Guardian, of course, MP29, and a sibling of MP29, MP23, which is another much larger, more vigorous rootstock than MP29. So we've got 2 seedling types compared to 2 clonal plum by peach hybrids. Because of space considerations, we had to crowbar this trial in. So everything was planted at 12-foot spacing in the row. That's pretty tight, put it mildly. But that's what we had, and there's some consequences, I'm sure, to that. But I had to use this site. This is, at the time, was the absolute worst armillaria site I had ever had experience with. And when you're doing disease screening, that's what you got to have. So you got to kill the trees. I hate to do it, but I've gotten pretty good at it over my career. So we had 8 reps, 5 tree plots. What this thing's doing here. Okay. I'm going to look at the survival data here first. Wish I could move this out a little bit farther. All right. Percent alive. Now, this is through not last year, but the year before. So we're 9 years into this trial now. 88% of the trees in MP29 are still alive. P22 is doing great. Guardian ain't doing so good. And MP23 is having some severe problems that aren't necessarily entirely the fault of armillaria. And so MP23, did I say MP29? MP23 has been dropped from any consideration. It has a couple of issues that have come up. I won't go into them for right now, but they're killers for it, so it ain't going out the door. Look at armillaria losses. MP29 is at the top of the pack. Guardian is getting slaughtered, and P22 is pretty much intermediate. Short life losses, until the very end of this trial, we hardly saw any. It's kind of unusual to see them come in late like this, and I'm a bit surprised at that. But basically, this trial is looking at armillaria resistance. When I look at the timeline, there you got it. Okay? Now, from my perspective, and I think from a grower's perspective too, you have to ask yourself, when do you pull a block out? I've used 50% mortality as my guiding principle. I realize that might not necessarily work for everybody. But you look at this plot, well, Guardian crossed that line a few years back. P22 is about to, though. And MP29 is well off from that. You know, coming up on 10 years here, and MP29 is still doing pretty good, well above 80%. I figure next year it'll probably still be above 80%. Years ago, someone asked me what my goal was for this program. It was a long time ago, and I naively said, I'd like to see a rootstock develop that would give us 90% survival at 15 years. I think I retired a little early. Okay, it is what it is. All right. Horticultural qualities. Now, these only go through 2018 because that was our last harvest year. But you look at the trunk cross-sectional area at that point in time, and MP29 is about half the size of Guardian. So that's a true dwarf. First trials we did led us to believe it was actually a little more vigorous than that, but that's what it's been holding up as. It's a true dwarf rootstock. P22 is a little bit smaller, maybe 10%. I've got some other trials there where it's running a little more vigorous than this. But again, it's throttled back a little bit, but it's not too different from things that you've seen in the past, like Lovell and Halford. All right, so I can talk about yield. I think I'll do that with some of the other slides that they're following up. I'll come back to this, but look at suckering down the last column. Guardian has always had a problem with this. One of the biggest complaints we've had about it, I guess. MP29 is very well behaved in this regard, although in the last 2 years, which are not reflected in this data, we are now starting to see some of the suckers that come up out away from the trunk. This is a trait that's common to plums, but does not happen in peach. So a potential problem with herbicide applications, I suppose, from that. For the most part, we manage them pretty well at the Byron lab. But we're not doing chemical mowing with Roundup, where they might possibly get hit by it. P22 is intermediate. It behaves much better, plays a lot nicer than Guardian does in this regard. Moving on. This photo was taken in 2015, so we're 4 years into the trial. You're looking at the end of the rows. These are 5 tree plots. The group on the left is P22. The group in the middle is MP29. And the group on the right is MP23, but it's a good stand-in for Guardian because it's every bit as vigorous as Guardian. You can see some obvious differences here, although between P22 and MP23, not much. But the trees in MP29 are much better behaved as far as they're bigger. And at this point in time, they were just starting to touch in the row. So 4 years in, and my rule of thumb is I want them to touch at about 5 years in. Fill your space. If you're not filling your space, you're wasting ground. Now, at this point in time, the trees on P22 and Guardian, on the other hand, are already starting to cross limbs. So this was really too tight a planning for it, but hey, it was the best I could do with the space we had available. Looking at the timeline for trunk growth, well, all I can basically say is MP29 is half the size of Guardian just about every step of the way, and P22 pretty well tracks Guardian, just a little bit less vigor. So we'll just leave it at that. Now, I hope I have some time to keep me notified of time. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is something I want to talk about. This is more generalized than just talking about P22. This is the yield per tree in the first cropping year at Clanton. The yield efficiency, which is calculated as the yield divided by trunk diameter, and the mean fruit size. Now, look at this first column. You're going to find this. Look at this yield. MP29 trees are half the size of Guardian, but that's better than 80% of the yield, okay? This is what yield efficiency is. This is what a precocious dwarf rootstock can do for you. This is what the apple people have been living with now for a long time and enjoying the benefit of. I want to bring this up because this is going to become important when we get into one of the sessions later on, but I wanted to point it out here. This is what a size controlling rootstock can do for you that partitions its photosynthase more into fruit and less into vegetative growth. Vegetative growth that you end up pruning off of your trees every single year. Water sprouts, excessive growth. You get used to taking it off. Apple people don't put up with this. And other crops that now have dwarfing rootstocks, like the cherry people and such, are also enjoying these benefits. It's one of those things that's hard to document unless you really want to bore in and really interfere with the management of a plot and try and get the data for it. But the people that have had this and the folks that have worked with MP29 have all commented on how much easier these trees are to manage. Now, I'm obviously not selling you P22 right now, but I have to make this point because although P22 is a big step forward, it's not where my heart is. Materials like MP29, I think, are really the future, and we're going to talk more about this in the rootstock section a little bit later on. But I wanted you to see this data. Now, in this particular year, you look at the yield. MP29 is, it's the equal to P22, and it's not even statistically significantly different from Guardian. Yield efficiency, though, it's nearly twice as good, and fruit size hasn't been hurt at all. Next year, did that move? Yes, 2015. What happened here? Well, now the yield is way down on MP29. And when I asked Jim Pitts about it, I said, what happened? He sheepishly told me, he said, I think we overthinned them. The crew commented they were so easy to work, they spent, well, I shouldn't say they spent more time, it was just easier to thin them. They didn't have a lot of big, tall, high limbs to reach for. And he thinks they overthinned the trees, and I have to agree with him. The yield efficiency is now the same as Guardian and P22. Mean fruit size, on the other hand, skyrocketed. Okay. Now you don't really need a 250 gram peach to ship. Okay. You're talking 3 inches plus there. Well, I shouldn't say 3 inches. That's averaging 2 3/4 essentially or better. So we threw a lot of the crop on the ground initially. I'm going to come back to this in just a second. Following year, all right, now MP29 is still doing about 2/3, 3/4 the cropping of Guardian. P22 is right behind it. Yield efficiency is way up now again for MP29. Fruit size back down with the other ones. All right. Last year, overthinned them again, looks like. So anyway, I calculated that had MP29 had a heavier crop on it, shall we say, commensurate with what its average yield efficiency had been for the entire length of this trial, that we left about 15% of the crop on the ground in 2015 and 30% of the crop on the ground in 2018. Makes a big difference when you start talking about cumulative yield, which I'm going to show you here in a bit. P22 has just been very well behaved. I can't say much about it as far as is there anything we could do to improve its yield efficiency and such. But truly dwarf precocious rootstocks like MP29 offer you some advantages you've never seen in the seedling type rootstocks that we've typically used here. Okay, moving on. Fruit size distribution. This is averaged over the entire cropping season. So the 4 years that we harvested. Remember, in 2017, we had no crop. We all know what happened then. I won't say anything more about it. But this is how the 3 different rootstocks broke out. The blue columns are Guardian, yellow is P22, and MP29 is red. And you can see that they're all putting most of their crop into the marketable sizes, 2.5 and up, 2 3/4 and up. But because I think MP29 was overthinned a couple of times, it threw an awful lot of fruit in these over 3 inch size class. I make it a little easier to look at. I just combined the middle two together. How you view that, how you think about 3 rootstocks, probably depends on what kind of use you have for your undersized and your oversized fruit. And there's going to be a difference probably if you're shipping versus if you're selling direct retail. And I'll just leave that to you to decide whether you think this is just a wash, which is pretty much what I think it is. I mean, they're all good rootstocks, okay? They're not having a problem producing marketable size fruit. All right, now, talk about what would these things do in some semblance of real life? Well, we don't have large cropping orchards of MP29 or P22 at this point in time, so I'm going to have to do the best I can. So I use this data to estimate per acre yields. So bear with me, and remember, these are merely estimates. You know, this is where you get in some serious trouble at times, I suppose. All right. This is a summary of what it would look like if we had planted MP29 at 12 feet, and if we had planted P22 and Guardian at 18 feet in real spacing, which is a little wide by some people's standards, but still not an unreasonable one. So tree densities of 204 versus 136 trees per acre. So you just take the per tree yield and multiply by those numbers of trees, and that's what you get. Now, when you look at the cumulative total at the far right-hand columns, you say, well, it looks to me like Guardian's still doing pretty darn good. Well, it did, although we did leave a fair amount of the crop of MP29 on the ground, and perhaps a little bit on P22, but it really makes Guardian look like it's still the winner here. Well, it is in this little fantasy. In real life, this is what you're looking at for tree survival. And I've noticed in my long career that dead trees don't produce many peaches. Now, that may be controversial to some of you, but I think I can stand by that. So if you don't take into account the fact that you're losing trees, that previous slide means nothing. So if I factor this in, These are what the results look like. And suddenly Guardian is the worst performer. Now, I'm going to back up just a second. 2008, 18, sorry, is where Guardian took a big, huge dive. That evaluation is done after the cropping year. In the case of armillaria, I see more trees die late in the summer after all dust is settled than I do in the beginning. So it hadn't really suffered all those tree losses. But imagine what that's going to look like down the road as basically Guardian just gets beat down to zero, assuming we actually follow an orchard that far. So here's with mortality, without. Okay? Enough said? All right. Here's another trial that was established in 2015 on what I now regard as the absolute worst armillaria site I have ever seen in my life. Dubious honor. All right. Here we tried some differential spacing, principally to see what the competition differences might make between trees, because we really weren't going to be able to harvest this trial. So here, the rows are 18 feet apart. P22 and Guardian are 16 feet apart in their plots. MP29 is 10 feet 8 inches. All right, 12 reps, 4 or 6 tree plots. Interesting little design because the tree spacing varies as you go down the row. And I have to think. It's the same sign. This, I believe, was, this is July prints here. Yeah. And by the way, the Clanton trial, I guess that was on July prints, but I think it says so in the table. Here we are. We're now at 6 seasons in, percent alive. MP29 is already down to 71. It wasn't even that low after 9 years at Clinton. Okay, but look at where Guardian is. All right, down to 25% already. P22, not doing quite as good here in this trial. I'm a little disappointed in it in this regard. But again, vast majority of the losses are to armillaria. But MP29 is really taking its hits too here. Okay, here's what the timeline looks like. I don't like the apparent convergence of the P22 and the Guardian lines somewhere down the road here. In fact, both of them are really below what I would regard as a productive orchard, a feasible orchard. With that said, this ground has been in production for a long time, and the grower intends to keep it in production for at least the foreseeable future. You can't cure everything with rootstocks, but you can see the relative performance is still pretty much the same. All right, looking at trunk cross-sectional area here, here's where we have a little departure from what I've seen in the past. MP29 is, again, a true dwarf, about half the size of Guardian, but P22 is running a little closer, 97%, essentially the same size as Guardian trees. With suckering, again, it's intermediate. So we're getting pretty similar results. And here's the time course on tree growth, which I think pretty well reflects that. MP29 is always about 50% of Guardian. Everywhere, every step of the way. Not what I do. Okay, summarize. P22 is about a full-size tree. It's the kind of tree you've been used to handling, but I think you might want to be thinking about what the future should look like. What we might want that would be different. It's got good resistance to peach tree short life. It does have usable resistance to armillaria, and I use the word tolerant versus resistant here to make a distinction here. It's not as good as MP29. It hasn't been as good as MP29 in any trial I've done. I don't want to mislead people here. It's not a substitute for MP29. It's a good alternative to Guardian. It has better resistance to nematodes than Guardian does. It's pretty comparable to MP29 in this regard, and it does have good productivity and fruit size. You can't complain about it. It's a good, useful piece of material. And for the nurseryman, it's a red leaf. Doesn't mean much to a grower, but that's pretty handy to have in a nursery setting when you go to desucker trees after budding. It's pretty easy to tell the difference between a green shoot and a red one. Even I can do it with a doctorate. Okay? So, something to be said for it. Now, as to the release, still got a few minutes? Yeah. About 5 minutes? Okay. We distributed some small test slots to 3 nurseries in Tennessee that have traditionally provided trees into the Southeast industry, so they could at least get some experience with it by hopefully this fall coming. They'll have germinated that seed and had a chance to bud it and see how it behaves under their management practices. We have about 80,000 seed in storage from last season. Boy, I want to tell you, that was a bear to, to process, to pick up and process, because the USDA lab was understaffed. We had a lot of issues with COVID still, but we got it. That's all I can say. There are actually two seed orchards, one in Byron and one in South Georgia. The one in South Georgia was not harvested this year. Their situation was even worse because of COVID in 2020 and 2021. We had no, logistically, we could not deal with harvesting it down there. So I don't know what the seed crop will be this year coming. I mean, that's obviously going to be on everybody's mind. That's not a lot of seed. Not when you're selling 1 million Guardian seed every year. This does not make much of a dent in the market. But we're going to have something to release this fall. Working on the patent as we speak. That'll be resolved. And I really see no barriers to the cooperative release this fall by the USDA, the University of Georgia, and the University of Florida. Cost, don't ask me. Nobody wants my opinion on this, so I can't tell you. I don't know what it'll play out to be at this point in time, but we'll have to just wait and see. Anyway, got any questions? Say again? Well, I see no reason really why you couldn't go closer, but I realize you have equipment issues to deal with. You've got big bat wings and stuff you're using for mowing. You're kind of constrained. But I look at those. I look at the trials that we've got, and you're wasting space between rows now with trees on MP29. I think until very, very late, potentially in the life of an orchard. So I think you could tighten them up in that direction too, not just down the row. But right now, I mean, 12 feet works pretty good, but I see rather remarkable differences on different sites, different fertility and management programs. I can't explain what's most important here. We're not controlling any of that. I see places where 12 feet looks a little generous even for MP29, for more years than I'd like it to be generous. Say 12 feet for that. I think you could close the row spacing up a little bit. You're going to have to get your hands on it and try it. I think after your first go around with it on your land, under your management scheme, you'll know what the right spacing should have been. Okay. I've seen trees with Monroe and a few others. It's out there. A number of growers, Chalmers Carr has a bunch of unusual things on it that I've never seen on. They're growing just fine. September sun. I'd have to go back to some of the documentation when it was released. MP29's been out there for 11 years now. I can't remember back that far anymore. It hasn't been used, but a lot of material, certainly at least 12 to 15, I would say. Okay. Well, I hear you, but you're seeing differences here. I mean, it's not having any trouble sizing for us. That's all I can say. I could think of some small varieties that you could put on it. You really want to see how bad it can be. But we have limited experience with the varieties. There's been a real bottleneck on trying to get the material out. The nurseries well know this. It's been very difficult to get this out with nurseries that are at northern latitudes. I guess would be the way to put it. Shorter growing seasons, cooler growing seasons. MP29 really likes heat, and it needs a longer growing season. Remember, from start, right out of the gate, as soon as you bud it, it's growing slower than trees on Guardian. And so that has consequences when you have a limited growing season in a nursery setting. I can grow a marketable tree at Byron. It's very difficult to do that in McMinnville and such, okay? Another question? Over here. You mean a finished tree or a nursery? Well, I mean, what's your experience with a standard bigger rootstock? Presumably you grow less every year. MP29 will trail similarly, be about half the size. Okay. 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 You'll see some data coming up next then. It'll answer your question better than I can. Any others? All right. Well, I'll be seeing you a little bit later. I'm giving Dario's presentation on the rootstock issues and such. So, yeah, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with y'all. I'm sorry that so many circumstances conspired to prevent me from being there. I was really looking forward to meeting again my good friends Greg Riegert and Tom Beckman. You see that I'm here from Michigan State. What you may not know is both of those guys are Michigan State University graduates. What you also may not know is that I'm a University of Georgia graduate. So here I grew up in Georgia and I'm working in Michigan, and those guys got their degrees up north and they're working down there where it's nice and warm. It was 0 degrees Fahrenheit this morning when I drove into the office. So when was I at Georgia? I was there. I graduated the same year that Herschel Walker led the Bulldogs to the national championship. So I just want to say that my fingers are crossed that they're going to pull it off and have another national championship in another couple of days. First time since I graduated back in 1981. So what I'm going to talk to you about is precision production systems for peach. And I'm going to give you some background on why I'm talking to you, because I'm primarily a cherry scientist, but I have been working in peaches for the last decade or so. And Tom Beckman, I know, gave me a good lead in. I was not able to hear Greg Riegert's presentation, but Tom kind of alluded to this fact that we all think we're on the cusp of precision and robotics in the tree fruit industries. Peaches is just a little bit farther behind coming to the table. As Tom noted, if we look at the U.S. apple production over the last 25 years, we'll see that apple production increased by 104% in that time frame, and the total acreage decreased by 30%. So more apples are being produced on less acreage, and the same thing can hold true, we dearly believe, with peaches. Once we start moving to dwarfing, precocious, carbon partitioning rootstocks that are going to put more of their effort into fruit and less effort into growing big trees. And I'm coming to you from talking about sweet cherries, because sweet cherry is probably the biggest problem child when it comes to trying to tame a fruit tree and make it into a very highly labor efficient orchard tree. Here you see how they used to pick cherries 100 years ago in Italy. This was a sweet cherry tree that I saw 2 years ago when I was driving on the bare roads when nobody was out due to COVID's first swing. You can see the flowering tree here. That's a true forest tree. Sweet cherry will get to be 3 to 4 times as big as a peach tree. And so its genetics move into it trying to be a forest tree. And we've tried to take a lot of takeaway notes about the tree's physiology to figure out, okay, how can we harness that physiology of a tree that wants to be in a forest and make it into a very productive, very labor efficient tree? Sorry, I was getting a little feedback there. So precision orchard principles and goals are how we're going to start this presentation out. We move to precision orchards, higher density orchards, narrower trees, in order to optimize our light interception. And I mean efficient light interception. So we want to intercept the most amount of light with the minimum amount of shade. Any part of the tree fruit canopy that is shaded is lower in its efficiency in capturing and utilizing that light. We want to optimize crop loads. So the better we can figure out what leaf to fruit ratios there are, the better we can match just the right number of leaves to the amount of fruit that we're trying to crop to achieve the kind of yields of high quality fruit that we're looking for. And more uniform fruit spacing means we're going to ripen more uniformly, and we'll have fewer picks for our labor. Simplify the fruiting units. So as we move to smaller trees, it becomes much easier to do these things. to figure out what our leaf area to fruit ratios are to space our fruit out more uniformly. And so as we move to small trees or even segments of trees, focusing just on those fruiting segments, the more precision we can bring into our orchards. And finally, as we do this, we will make our labor much more efficient for pruning, for thinning, and for harvest. These large chaotic tree canopies that we see here or that you grow with open vase peach trees are not conducive to worker efficiencies, worker safety, optimization of light, because that directly relates to yields and fruit quality, precision crop management, or low environmental impact, as we see here, these sprayers blowing pesticides far into above the canopies. So we started with some physiological studies. This was a student of mine, Matt Whiting, back when I was at Washington State University. We were looking at how much leaf area is needed for a fruit to attain the desired fruit size and the desired fruit sugar levels. And we see both of these curves, the top one being fruit size and the bottom one being fruit sugar level, being very similar in that about the amount of leaf area that we need is 200 to 250 square centimeters of leaf area. So that equates to about 2 or 3 shoot leaves per fruit or 4 to 8 spur leaves per fruit, because we have both shoot leaves and spur leaves on sweet cherry trees. So now we've got a target of, if we can start to estimate leaf area, we can figure out how much crop of the desired quality we can carry on that tree. So another graduate student of mine, Marlene Ayala, looked at how to measure the photosynthesis of different groups of leaves, such as the shoot leaves you see on the new part of the growth, the spur leaves that don't have any fruit, or the spur leaves that do have fruit, and track where the carbon is coming from that's creating the sugars and the fruit cells in those fruits. And what she confirmed was that most of that carbon, pretty much 80 to 90% of it for most of the period of fruit growth, is coming from those spur leaves. Very little is coming from the new shoot leaves. So we can start to think about which leaves on a tree are providing the carbon that we need for fruit growth, which are providing the carbon that creates excessive growth or that creates shade and makes things much less efficient. Another thing that we thought about was when a cherry is growing vertically, because that's what a forest tree needs to do. It needs to grow as tall as it can get as quickly as possible to capture light and survive in the forest. We looked at how the leaves are formed on new vertically growing shoots. And what they're formed is by a mathematical number called the Fibonacci arrangement. It's about 137 degrees from the previous leaf. So leaf 1 forms, and then leaf 2 forms 137 degrees away from that, and leaf 3 forms 137 degrees away from that. So this evolutionary efficiency means the leaves are forming in a vertical shoot at the best position to intercept light and with minimal shading of the leaves below it. As we move from a one-dimensional canopy, that is the first year's growth, to subsequent year's growth, we start getting lateral branches that come out. And each of these lateral shoots tend to follow that same pattern for light interception, but shade starts increasing because we're now moving from basically a one-dimensional vertical shoot to a three-dimensional, multi-dimensional canopy. And as that third dimension occurs and shade starts increasing, we start getting a reduction in light efficiency, and we see an increasing need for pruning. Tom alluded to this about the advantages of MP29. So 20 years ago, as I was making the transition from Washington to Michigan, I decided to try to redevelop the canopy of a sweet cherry tree to be most efficient. What we call this is the upright fruiting offshoots, or UFO, to break the tree down into much smaller fundamental fruiting units that give us the basic leaf area and fruiting sites that we need to manage a balanced crop load. And then we simply try to repeat that across all of these vertical shoots. Some of the beauty of this is that it distributes light very uniformly, and it minimizes the shade, with the green here being the light exposure illustration, and the gray being the minimal shade that we see in a system like this. So it's very efficient from a light interception point of view. It simplifies our quantification of leaf area to fruits, and it utilizes a horticultural concept of diffusing the vigor of the tree into multiple leaders. And that's typically what you do with your open vase trees and peaches, is you're diffusing the vigor of that peach tree into multiple leaders and trying to keep it somewhat small, at 13 or 14 feet high perhaps. So we're doing this with cherries in a very structured, precise way. We'll set up a trellis system with 3 wires. We'll tie twine at 8-inch increments, and we'll grow the cherry tree, creating horizontal growth of cordons in the first or second year. And from that point onward, we'll try to grow vertical fruiting units, the upright fruiting offshoots. Part of the beauty of this is that regardless of the rootstock vigor, the number of upright fruiting offshoots in the fruiting wall always have the same spacing, because that's how we optimize light interception per row. So if we have a dwarfing rootstock, we may have 6 of these upright fruiting offshoots on a tree. And if we have a very vigorous rootstock, we may have 12 or 15 of these upright fruiting offshoots on a cherry tree. So the training system can be utilized across different vigors of rootstocks. This just shows you some mature trees, or at least moving towards mature. On the left is an orchard in New Zealand, a commercial orchard. On the right are some of our research trials here at Michigan State. But you can see the efficiency, the narrowness of the rows, like Tom was talking about, and how easy it is to see the fruit for picking. So we proved over 10 years that with our comparison to standard central leader trees or some open bush type trees called KGB, or very high density central leader trees, that the UFO architecture either was equal to or outperformed the others in terms of yield in our conditions. Matt Whiting, who took my place at Washington when I moved here after he got his PhD, he also has shown that the UFO is more than twice as efficient in terms of fruit harvest as the traditional open center tree. It takes half the time to pick a pound of fruit in a UFO as it does in a traditional open center tree. And it's also more efficient than the other architectures that we've been looking at over the years. So 10 years ago in 2016, in 2011, we started working on planar architectures, very narrow fruiting wall canopies for stone fruits, with plums, peaches, nectarines, and apricots. We looked at what we call an espalier, a tall spindle axe central leader tree, a high-density super slender axe central leader tree, and the UFO type trees. And what we concluded after 6 years in that study was that the espalier and the tall spindle, the single leader, central leader, were just too vigorous. We're not diffusing vigor enough. We're not pruning enough to contain that vigor. So we had a lot of vigor in the tops of the trees, and we had a lot of shading going on and loss of fruiting wood in the bottoms. The SSA was the most vigor limiting, and that's what you see in this picture here. It's most vigor limiting because you've both got root competition from the trees being planted very closely and severe annual pruning, cutting the lateral branches back to very short segments to regenerate the lateral growth. The UFO multiple leaders diffused vigor as well, but they required SSA type pruning, since with peach, fruiting is on previous season shoots, not with spurs like we have in apricots, plums, and sweet cherries. So we had to modify our pruning a bit with the UFO architecture when we moved to peach and nectarine. And across these systems, we found that summer hedging pre-harvest improved our light for fruit color and for flower bud formation for the next year. So those are our takeaway conclusions. This is the SSA type pruning that we talked about. There on the left, you see an unpruned vertical leader, and on the right, you see a vertical leader that's been pruned. It gives us much easier to quantify our crop load, because what we tell the thinners is that leave 1 fruit per shoot. You don't have to worry about estimating different lengths or different vigors of shoots. So we put a little more time into the dormant pruning, and it greatly improves the efficiency of thinning as well as harvest. So one of our growers Chuck Rash at Windy Ridge Orchard picked up on this idea, seeing our trials, and set up in 2015 his own UFO orchard, as you see here. And I'm just very impressed that it's the width of these trees is no wider, essentially, than the peach baskets there. You can see here he planted his trees 8 feet apart. His vertical upright fruiting offshoots were 24 inches apart, and he fruited about 20 fruit per liter. You can see that with the mechanical summer hedging to get light in there, very uniform ripening. He reduced the number of picks from 4 to 5 down to 2 to 3, and very high coloration. So in 2017, we set up our next generation trials. These are two different trials. One is our NC140 peach rootstock perpendicular V trial. That there are duplicates of this trial in Georgia, in South Carolina, in Alabama, and North Carolina, as well as elsewhere across the country. Then we also had a variable leader SSA pruned nectarine trial, where we put in 1 liter or 2 liters per tree in a planar architecture, or 4, 6, or 8 liters per tree, grown vertically as we would grow in a UFO, but grown in a 3-dimensional tree canopy, just because it's more similar to what we've done in the past. The tree spacing was 3 feet for the 1 liter trees, 6 feet for the 2 and 4 liter trees, 9 feet for the 6 liter trees, and 12 feet for the 8 liter trees. Here you can see our results from last year. This is after the trees are 5 years old. On the top here, we can see that if we call 1 liter 100%, when we double the liters and double the space we give to that root system, we increase the vigor of that tree by 24%. We quadruple those number of liters and we at the same spacing, and we increase the vigor of the tree 41%. We increase the spacing even more to 9 feet and 6 liters, and we've increased the vigor of the individual trees by 62%. And we go up to 8 liters and wider spacing yet at 12 feet, and we've doubled the size of that tree, 205% of the 1 liter tree. Now this is measured by trunk cross-sectional area, but you can also see tree height. And this is where it starts to become interesting. As we diffuse that vigor, we see that the tree height drops from 100% of the 1 liter tree down to 78% of the 8 liter trees. Also interesting is when we look at the the leader cross-sectional area. So the leader at 5 feet tall is where we're taking these measurements. And we can see that the leaders decrease just like the tree height does, from 100% down to only 37 or 39% for the 6 or 8 liter trees. So what we're getting is less vigorous leaders. That shows up then in the number of lateral shoots that are forming as well. So we've got fewer shoots forming on those leaders as we diffuse the vigor, and those shoots are less vigorous. They're not as long, so they're creating less shade. So we could say, well, the leaders are shorter, so they have fewer lateral shoots. But we can also see that even as the number of shoots decreases as the number of leaders go up, we also see that the shoot density decreases as the number of leaders go up. So indeed, we've got lower density of these lateral shoots and better light. So these are the principles that we are looking for when we get into vigor limiting rootstocks or horticultural techniques for limiting vigor as well. So this moves to the NC140 trial. I'll just show you the results that we've had. I think perhaps Greg Riegert shared with you results during his presentation. We've got the controllers, the root packs, Lovell and Guardian, and MP29. And here in Michigan, under our conditions, very sandy soils, you can see that let me jump back. We moved from Lovell and Guardian as vigorous trees to Controller 6 and Root Pack 20 as semi-vigorous, Controller 8 and Controller 7 as semi-dwarfing, and MP29 and Root Pack 40 as dwarfing. If we look at that the leader cross-sectional area and the lateral shoot numbers per leader, we see those also follow. As the vigor decreases, those values decrease. So one of the things that this tells us in combination with these two trials is that as we move towards adopting vigor-limiting peach rootstocks, we need to think about the architecture of the tree. For dwarfing rootstocks, we probably only want 1 liter on those trees. For semi-dwarfing, we probably want 1 to 3 liters, depending on the vigor of the cultivar or the vigor of the site. For semi-vigorous root stocks, we probably want 3 to 5 liters. And for our vigorous trees, we probably need 6 to 8 liters to truly diffuse that vigor out and keep the tree as tame as we would like to optimize our light efficiency. So this just gives an example of some of the trees in a different one of our trials. These trees are spaced 6.5 feet apart, so the leaders are 3.5 feet apart. And you can see with a target yield of 12 tons per acre with 175 or 6.2 ounce fruit, we need 60,000 fruit per acre on these trees. I've got 1,620 liters per acre, so I need to fruit 37 fruit on each liter. But you can see we've got a lot of empty space here. So if we filled that space more efficiently, we'd be up to 2,150 liters per acre, meaning we only need 28 fruit per liter. And as we saw in one of the previous tables, that with a calm tree, we could average about 4.5 shoots per foot. So for 28 fruit with 1 fruit per shoot, that means our minimum fruiting liter section need only be about 6.5 feet tall. So this is the kind of precision that I'm talking about we're able to now accomplish when we've greatly simplified and structured the tree canopy. So what we would do in our next trial is we'd plant an orchard with our twine and our trellis just like cherries, but the twine is now 30 inches apart. We'd fill each of those twines with our upright fruiting offshoots of peach. We'd be shooting for probably 25 to 30 fruit per upright to get those kind of target yields and fruit quality that we're looking for. This is just a picture of a UFO peach understudy in Tatura, Australia at their research station. So I want to finish off by just talking about all the advantages that we see coming down the road for planer grown orchards of peaches. This shows you narrow hedged walls of apples in New Zealand. Very beautiful light interception. You see great color in all these apples on this fruiting wall. These narrow canopies facilitate mechanized platforms for safer, more efficient labor, so you get rid of ladders that are dangerous for our workers and highly inefficient, much more efficient to work on a platform. These are sweet cherries in Michigan. Here's a platform running down a fruiting wall of nectarines in Italy. We're moving towards autonomous transports too, and this just shows these are now commercially available. They are for transporting fruit that has been picked by humans out of the blueberry orchard. The machines work totally on their own. There's no control needed. And that improves the picker efficiency by up to 40%, just taking that away from the extraneous movements that they would be doing. We can look at things like sensors and imaging for acquiring data in the orchard. Tractor-mounted or four-wheeler-mounted arrays of imaging cameras and sensors can map and quantify flower buds, bloom, crop load, leaf area. And what we do with this data that we're acquiring through these different means, either manned or even unmanned, as you see here, from vehicles or drones, is that we can use that to then inform smarter implements for our orchards. This is a sprayer that has smart zonal spray nozzles. That means each one is individually activated by a sensor. So the sensor that would be on the front of this tractor that maps out where the fruit is or where the diseases are only activates the nozzles that spray the portion of the canopy that needs to be sprayed, whether it's for thinning or for fruit protection or whatever. But it only works with a planar canopy. So we think about trying to develop mechanization for thinning of peaches, and this is non-selective. And even if we move to a planar orchard, you see the Darwin is non-selective, but the day is coming very soon that we would probably have individually activated mini string thinners or maybe even air jets that would pulse out only when the data that's acquired through the sensor or the imager tells us here's a heavy cluster, we need to break that up. Here's a light cluster. We don't need to activate the strings or activate the air jet. This is an autonomous ultraviolet light treatment robot that treats high tunnel tray strawberries for preventing disease control, so a chemical-free means of controlling things like powdery mildew. This is one that runs autonomously. In an orchard, there you see the UV lights come on, it moves down these rails, it comes out, turns around all by itself. Here's one that's built for wine grapes. It's very easy to imagine one that was a little bit taller that would be built for tree fruits. We're looking at robotic strawberry harvesters here, totally automated. The sensors indicate where there are ripe red fruit, and the hands come down and pick the fruit. And these are now in operation in California. Robotic strawberry harvesters working in the United Kingdom with tray strawberries. A whole host of these robots come through and pick the ripe fruit. This one is really impressive. This is the robotic kiwi fruit harvester working in New Zealand. Totally autonomous. Here you see it's moving through. On a second, you're going to see it moving through, mapping out where the fruit are. There it's mapping out and sensing the fruit so that then the follow-up machine can come through and pick the fruit. This is a robotic apple harvester that has been in use for the past 4 years in both Washington State and New Zealand in experimental operations. You see it's sensing the fruit entirely with a camera. In a minute here, you're going to see it's going to miss a fruit, and it even knows it missed it. There, it missed the fruit, so it came back, and there, it took the fruit away. Here's a robotic apple harvester in Japan using the UFO architecture for apples. Here's one being worked on in Australia. In Israel, they're working on drones to pick fruit off of apple trees. At Georgia Tech, they're working on a robotic peach harvester. This is probably from the past season where they did some tests on a natural or a typical peach tree. And we're in discussions with them about being able to work on their algorithms to pick it in a planar canopy, which will be much simpler than trying to figure out how to pick a peach in this three-dimensional canopy. So I hope that excites you to see what's coming down the pike, and hope it gives you ideas on how to utilize rootstocks and training ideas and techniques for your next orchard so that you're prepared for the next 10 years and beyond for all the innovations that are coming down the pike. These planar UFO-type tree fruit canopies will facilitate these types of precision applications, such as being suitable for peaches, the other tree fruits. They utilize the tree's natural growth habit and light harvest efficiency, and get easier crop load management with simplified fruiting units. They achieve equal or increased yields with narrower rows. They are more efficient for hand harvest. They facilitate the use of hedging and platforms, and they are critical for the adoption of sensing and imaging technologies that acquire data, which then we'll be able to use for smart target spraying and thinning, and for adopting robotic pruning and harvest technologies. So with that, I thank you for your attention. I hope this all came through the technology well, and I'm happy to answer questions or later when we're in the panel session.
Hey, Dr. Lane, this is Andy again. We're going to try to answer some questions. If this work out, if you can hold on for a few seconds.
I can't hear you very well, but it sounds like
We're going to try
to
to
ask questions.
If you can hear me okay.
I'm getting an echo.
Can you hear me though?
Oh, that's much better.
Okay. Go ahead and do a test on that mic. Can you hear that other mic?
It's kind of fuzzy, but I can hear you fine. We'll give it a try.
Okay. Are there any questions for Dr. Lang? There's one over here. He was asking if you're located at Clarksville. Where are you located, Dr. Lang?
So I'm located at our main campus in East Lansing, but my research is located at Clarksville and also at our Benton Harbor Southwest research station. That's the peach research is.
Do you have any field days coming up, Dr. Lang?
We sure hope we do. We haven't had a field day for 2 years, and so we're definitely planning to have field days both at Clarksville and Benton Harbor. We're just waiting for this Omicron to subside and hope that we're all back to normal by summertime.
Okay, other questions? It might be easier to just handle it like this, just repeating them. Get another question? He's, he's asking, how do you renew your fruiting shoots?
Good, great question. How do we renew the fruiting shoots? So with peach, what we'll do is we'll cut back to a short stub. We actually wait because we've lost our crop to spring frost first couple years of this trial. And so we'll wait till we kind of see what our bloom is looking like. And even this past year, we waited until what our fruit set was starting to look like. And then we'll prune back to our closest fruit to the main leader, to the upright fruiting offshoot. And we'll leave several vegetative buds to then grow out and create the replacement leaf area that's going to support the growth of that. In terms of how often we renew the upright fruiting offshoots, that we're still working on. We don't know if we can keep those going for 10 years or if we have to renew them after 5. This most recent trial is only 5 years old, so that's the kind of question we'll be answering over the next few years.
Any other questions for Dr. Lang? If not, I really appreciate all of your time, Dr. Lang, and a lot of the things you talked about are encouraging to see, and particularly preventing some of that blank wood in the middle. And our pruning things are important to me, and this tends to happen quite often. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, let me just make a couple comments. You make a really good point there that with this improved light efficiency and the reduced shoot growth, lateral shoot growth, we've been able to maintain really nice uniform cropping up and down these leaders. The other point that I wanted to just throw out to the audience there is a plug for the International Fruit Tree Association annual conference. Because we're focusing on peach in some of the sessions this coming year. It's going to be held in Hershey, Pennsylvania. We're going to be talking about peach rootstocks, new training systems, and robotic harvesters. And we've got Ian Goodwin coming from Tatura, Australia, at least virtually, to speak. So keep your eyes open for IFTA if you feel comfortable making that trip. It would be really worth it for a peach grower.
Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Lang. Dario is he's not. So we don't need to do the we can cancel it. Stay on?
Yeah.
Sure.
I will find out.
It is. Yeah. Okay. Not sharing.
It's a huge presentation.
Oh, it is sharing. Okay. Unfortunately, Dr. Dario Chavez wasn't able to attend, so Dr. Tom Benton is going to take his place here. So, Tom, second show.
I'll do the best I can. If Greg Lang's presentation didn't enlarge your world considerably, you must have been asleep. Now, he's talking about an awful lot of stuff here as far as changing things in our orchards in order to utilize more efficient approaches, both disease management, management of the trees, production of fruit, high quality, large fruit. It's more than just rootstocks. Rootstocks we're going to be talking about today. But one thing I would like to encourage you to do is you mentioned the IFTA, International Fruit Tree Association. It used to be IDFTA, the annual meeting. But what I would also encourage you to do is look for your summer tours. I went on one in 2016 on a lark. It was on a thunder spindle apple system what they were demonstrating, and I'm not talking about proofing, were things that they were talking about as, shall we say, dreams back when I was in grad school in the early 80s. You know, things that were taking place in Europe and talking about, well, how about we brought some of these systems here? If they had everything in place, it could be done like a cookie. You couldn't believe how things had changed in the outdoor industry. I've been completely separated from it for 30 years. Hadn't paid any attention to it. We don't grow much in the way of benefits company. Didn't matter. It'll inspire you, that's all I can say. And that's what really got me started about tree architecture. And I realized that what we had to have was, working rootstock, we had to have some means of vigor control, by whatever means. You know, it could be done with rootstock, it could be done with other management schemes. It could be done by diluting the vigor of the sign variety. We also needed different sign varieties. And Greg touched briefly on this when he pointed out that peaches are really the only stone fruit, or only commercial stone fruit crop that isn't dominated by sign varieties that are spur type. Spur type. It's a genetic difference in tree architecture, and it has real interesting, I won't say consequences, benefits. There are spur type peaches, which are really quite rare. We need more of those. There's a variety of development here as well. But I realized I've got MP29. And we were aware of spur types because there's another breeding program that I was involved in as a sideline. We had found spur types in the program, and we had gone full tilt to produce more varieties like it. So we did an initial test, and I was really impressed. We were producing some trees very much like what you saw Greg showing. Much easier to handle. In fact, we overshot the mark on some combinations. So we need a lot more material. What I'm going to talk about today is rootstock, where we are, and some of the problems that are, I think, standing in our way. So this is Dario's presentation. I provided some data and information for it, and Greg Ryder did as well. And let me go through this so I can kind of point out what the issues are here. No, this thing will move. What did I just do now? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Sharing a screen. I don't think I need to be sharing a screen. Can you fix this? All right. Don't give me complex electronic devices. Yeah. These are, I don't think these are the slides though. Oh, okay. Well, this is coming up a little different than I thought it was going to be. I'm sorry. Let me just back up. All right. When I practice this, the slide's going to be behaving like this. Is kind of interesting. Talking about the importance of rootstock, they're a critical component. We utilize them primarily for disease resistance in the peach industry, but there's a lot more to them than that, obviously, in vigor. And the propagation methods are what I really want to bring to your fore here right now. Sexually propagated material is seed propagated material. Okay? Asexual means any cloning. Sexual propagation. All right. This is what's really still most common throughout most of the industry. I'd say the apple industry is quite an obvious exception to this stuff. It's low cost. One of the reasons why it persisted, and you can produce large numbers quite easily once you're established. Once you got, for instance, seed production, in production. You do have variable seedlings, though. You have genetic variability in the progeny, and it varies from one line to the next. Some are extraordinarily uniform. Others are not. And I'd say Guardian is not particularly uniform, really, compared to some of the other lines that have been around for a while. You do have issues with seed-transmitted diseases, viruses and such, but you have a one-year growing cycle. Typical procedure in Tennessee, for instance, is the seeds planted in the fall, stratifies naturally in the soil over the winter, it pops up in the spring. By the end of May, 1st of June, it's ready to be budded. They go ahead and bud them. They got a long enough growing season to produce the finished tree by fall. Great, 1 year. Not to be confused with clonal propagation, though. Okay. Asexual. Now, the big advantage here is genetic identity. They're all alike. There's another reason for having to do this, though, it hasn't been touched on here, and that is when you produce wide hybrids, interspecific hybrids particularly, they will not breed true. Many of them can't be bred at all. For instance, MP29 is a sterile mule. It does not have viable flowers on it. It produces neither seed nor pollen. So the only way to propagate that is clonal. You have no But the problem here typically is you're starting with very small plants. So you're taking 1 year growing cycle to grow a buddable size plant, and the second year to grow the plant off, with obvious consequences for cost of production. Cuttings. Now, obviously, generally more expensive than seedlings, and it requires specialized operations, greenhouses, so on and so forth. Clean sources are required because what you're going to do is you're going to be reproducing a diseased piece of material if you don't start clean. And softwood and hardwood cuttings, depends on whether they're selected during the growing or the dormant season. Micropropagation, still more expensive, highly specialized. We're talking about a tissue culture operation under sterile conditions. But it has a real advantage in that you can scale really fast. You get something into production in years, a year or two, rather than, I won't say a decade, but setting up a seed orchard, waiting for it to come into production, so on and so forth. Man, micropropagation just blows it away. Oh, and it's real clean. If you start clean, it's really hard for anything else to be introduced into the system. And this is a great way to move material around, quite sanitary-wise, from one country to the next. Seed propagated material, good luck with that. Sending budwood, good luck with that. This is a lot easier. So distribution of material is much easier done this way. Storing the mine, clearing, okay. I'll let you read this yourself. You plant the mother plants, you induce adventitious roots, and the different techniques just varying how you orient the parent plant. Mounding, harvest the shoots in the fall. It doesn't save you much time, but it's a lot easier way to do it. There's a lot less labor involved usually doing schooling and layering. Diseases can be a problem here for all these reasons. Now, rootstocks that are available in the market. There's a pattern here I hope you discern. United States, older releases. Well, we got a set of both clonal, although most of those on the clonal side are not for us, they're for almonds and for some other prunus crops, but not so much for peach. Seed, on the other hand, you've probably seen a lot of these names around. But a lot of these go back a long time. These are old releases. Newer releases. Got a lot of new clonal rootstocks come out. And notice that a lot of these are interspecific hybrids, okay, including MP29 at the bottom of the list. Guardian and Florida Guard are probably two of the most recent seed propagated rootstocks. That's not as many as there were in the past. French, older releases, few. I'm beginning to wonder what happened at the end of the program. I don't know if they're still active or not. I haven't had any communications with them for quite some time. I think this program maybe is shut down. Spanish, on the other hand, older releases were all clonal. Newer releases are all clonal. Italian rootstocks, all clonal. Newer ones, all clonal. Are you seeing a pattern here? Russian rootstocks, all clonal. Right now, I'd say the Byron program is the only breeding program I'm aware of that's producing new seed propagated rootstocks. Okay? We'll come back to this in a minute. Peach rootstocks in the southeast. This is basically what you're choosing from, or will be choosing from. Here for the southeast, material that's going to be bud up for you. You're going to be looking to use. You look down that list. First half of it's all seed. Then you got MP29, clonal, sharp, clonal. The sharp is dead in the water, doesn't have the production potential that we need. Florida Guard actually swung both ways for a couple of reasons. One was a limited seed supply, for one thing, and then it was an issue of what they thought was perhaps an off-type parent trees, seed parent trees, really. P22 will be seed. The world is moving to clonally propagated material. Now, the rootstocks that I've gone through, I didn't say anything about them, but they're bred for particular purposes. In many cases, it's for disease resistance. Now, in many cases, that disease resistance isn't germane to you, isn't pertinent to you. But if you want to utilize these materials, particularly the clonal one, you're going to have a source of trees that can propagate on clonal rootstocks. Okay? I'm not saying the Byron program would stop doing seed propagated rootstocks. We've got a lot of material still under test. But I don't think anybody else is even thinking about these anymore. So if you want to tap into the newer material, you're going to have access to sources that can propagate on clonal material. All right. Now, I'm going to segue. I can't believe it. That never happens. Into the idea here is to have an open panel, a discussion, not between you and me, or me just lecturing to you or whatever, amongst yourselves to address some of these issues. We are at a crossroads in my mind that what little you're getting from the Byron program isn't all that you need to be able to look at. There's a lot of other material out there, and it's not going to stop coming. Please, if you would. So, we need common goals and needs. What do the growers need? What do they think they need for the future? Not just for what our immediate concerns, but the things that Ray was talking about. This is the future. Other industries are going there, and they're going just as fast as they can. And I see it right now. They have more tools at their disposal than the southeastern industry has. All right. Possible issues with current propagation methods that need to be addressed. Right now, we have a bottleneck. For instance, for MT29. And I can't blame anybody for it, because I understand the issues that nurseries are faced with. They're in a 2-year growing cycle with a piece of material. It's been pretty hard for them to propagate efficiently under their circumstances. Right? And other things we want to keep in mind for the future. And perhaps some of this can come from you. Now, that's really where I stop. Okay? I need to hear, Johnny, I hope you have a lot of notes to take here. I need to hear concerns and issues. I mean, are you hearing me? We are cutting ourselves off from access to new materials coming out. And I think we need to address why and what to do about it. Okay? What can we do about it? Somebody asked me if I would produce MT29 and start a nursery. I said, you must not like me very much. I'm retired. Okay? I got other things I want to do. I mean, I'm here to help, but this wasn't what I was planning on doing with my retirement. Bill, can I hammer you for a comment? What do you need? What do you need to make this work for you? You guys, the folks in Tennessee are our suppliers of trees for the most part. Yeah, we get some out of California, and we get some out of Pennsylvania and elsewhere. But you have traditionally been our suppliers of trees. What has to change in order to make this work? You dropped it in the right place there, Andy. How did you know?
I was sitting here thinking, as you said, that ground in the southeast land is probably, it's easy to access land. What has been in other countries and places you're talking about, follow rootstocks, and I think that may not always be that way. Maybe growers and nurseries in the southeast have been spoiled to a simple way to do things. One thing with the clonal rootstocks is that you have to put a lot more thought into it. It's a lot more expensive. You're talking about a 10-year process, and so growers would need to tell us 2 years. When we visit growers in May, they tell us what to bud farm in June, and they won't get that fall.
That's right.
So that's not going to happen with the clonal rootstock because it's a 2-year process.
Right.
And it's a lot more expensive, and that's one of the problems with it so far that we've ran into is growers are hesitant about paying at least twice as much for a tree as they are a juvenile tree. At least twice as much. And we haven't figured out a way to make your money out of that. You may be absolutely right. The industry may be going to clonal rootstocks, but as a nurseryman, and I think Daniel would tell you the same thing, hold on. Wherever the industry takes us, that's where we'll go. We'll do right. But there's a lot of problems with clonal rootstock that we have to cover. The ways that we're growing them, we are rooting trees from other plants that we have in our nursery. We have them at the roots of about 35 to 40,000 plants a year is all he can do. And he's fixing to retire. So we're going to have to find another avenue to get our plants. Tissue cultures are by far better. They're not as crooked. When you grow them, they grow straighter. They're easier to deal with. They're very expensive. You can buy tissue cultures cheaper in California, but the price of tissue culture, we were talking about it a little earlier, the price of tissue culture plant in California and the price of tissue culture plant in Florida. If you're licensed to grow, ranges from about $1.40 to $2 a piece. That's just for the plant. If you get half the stand with the rootstock, you've got $4 in the rootstock. And so, you know, the biggest thing that helped us was there was a laboratory in the southeast that produced tissue culture plants that we could buy regionally. And then the growers would have to be 2 years ahead.
Also, he says 2 years ahead. It's really 3 years ahead at this point. There's not a standard for how many of these cuttings that these nurseries are going to be producing.
That's right.
We have to allocate the rootstock actually 3 years in advance.
They've got to prep for it.
Yeah. So until there's a standard that these people are producing every year, just like an RDC through anything,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, it's really hard to get people on the game for 3 years out.
I hear you.
We're trying.
We really
We're
are.
really trying. You know, and we're not picking up the same. But last year, I think we propagated winning 4,000 MP29, and I think we ended up with about 7,000. And we have had better luck with that in the past. But you just don't know from year to year. They're just not as easy to deal with. But we are working on it. We're doing the best that we can.
I don't know. Any grower comments?
Everybody who wants to pass this around, this is what we're talking about with the tissue culture material working with. And Daniel's right, this is a 3-year process. So for us to build and order what the name for any nursery, start from off with 7.5, we need a year in advance with these big mothers to be able to build up and grow out. So yeah, that too is definitely more than 3 years. Well, I think that one lab, that's probably 3 months.
I'm not missing which one is it?
So this is MP29. Yes, sir. That would be that stage to the bottom.
You're looking at about 6 months, 6 to 8 months.
Anybody else? I'd like to hear from the growers about their thoughts on this. You know, numbers you need, other issues perhaps?
I got a question for the nursery department. Is there any research or any product that you get out of a function for the process? Y'all can, I say, but we got a great team of researchers and folks that, you know, development benefits the growers, you know, but the bottleneck with nursery, that's might be some
Let me say this, and you think about the tissue culture, that sounds to me like, but if you plant the tissue culture too early in the spring, the cold weather kills it. And we didn't explain that earlier. So you have to wait later, you have to wait past the window, get the big enough to June planting, so the cold weather. That's why we can't get the tissue culture out. I know somebody's thinking, well, why can't you plant the tissue culture January, February? You don't get big enough, but in June, you can't because it's still freezing out. And after you wait past that window of cold weather, then it's the rest of the big enough. But we all work together. We're trying.
So, to me, that's, you're talking, y'all talking things I don't even understand. That's your business, that's growing, y'all, and I don't think I can help you. What I can do, I think, is say, this is what I want to think. Or what you can tell me is, this is what it's gonna cost. That means a 40% or 20%, whatever it is, to create that finished tree, 2 years or 3 years, whatever you got in it. So this is what it's gonna cost. And I can say, I can't afford that, especially if it's like Chris Rager, that's hard. Or, absolutely, in 3 years, I want this many, and then it's just a matter of whether or not you can produce that many. But to me, it's just a matter of being honest. You know, I call it how the world we do. Y'all know what's going on. Propagation. Well, we're actually losing money on that now. And you get back to what Lee said, if we could get our livability up, we could maybe do better than the break even. But, when you're working on 40% livability, 40 to 50 is what we're doing.
Well, that's what brings me to the point, they have enough for lifeguards don't get it out, they ask so many, like, get to that. You didn't take the risk, amplify, so you can get what they want, you can use money,
When we figure out a way to get the livability better, figure out what we can settle on a set price. But right now, we're actually losing money. And I'll say this, we're not just losing money, we're losing brains.
I think FP 29 requires a paradigm shift. What you're saying, what I'm saying is, what a lot of us have tried to do is put a square peg around it. Okay? It's not a seed. It doesn't require stratification. You're dealing with a growing plant. Okay? We've grown plants perhaps starts, we call them thimble plants, very small plants with a very small root ball. And we grow them in a greenhouse, and we get edible plants in greenhouse. Edible plants, now, we're not a commercial nursery, we're a research lab, we're breeding lab. But I think that the technology is there, we just got to decide to do things a different way. Now, at the 29, if you decide to go a different route, okay, and again, grind the whole system from square one and go into a greenhouse propagation system, that means you can grow plants year round, and you can bud year round, and the grower has the opportunity not only to plant in the winter, but if they have field irrigation, they can plant anytime during the summer or early fall. It's up. Then that gives the grower the flexibility of when to plant, and it gives the nurseryman the ability to bud and to provide plants, let's say 9 months out of the year. Okay. And I think that's what they're saying.
But I think the price doesn't have to be, well, I'm sorry, I'm talking about us, a place here, because I'm not a commercial measurement. I think that there's definitely ways to cut costs and to generate plants quicker. And, and don't be fooled by a small tissue culture plant. If you put it into potting mix in a pot, and you give it the appropriate amount of fertilizer and care, it'll grow very quickly. You can attain valuable plants much quicker than you can in the field. But it requires irrigation, it requires labor, and it requires a greenhouse structure. Now, there's other issues involved, like lights and greenhouses and things like that. Those are different issues. But I think you really, if you're really thinking of doing this in the field, P22, you know, that's really what you're looking at. It's either or. Do you want a Cadillac or do you want a Toyota? What do you want for your Rootstock? And how do you want to Sorry, I'm Jose Chaparro, I'm the Peachtree or University of Florida. It was a different failure for the first commercial first time around. You're talking about you're talking you can't compare somebody who's there for one person who's doing it the first time. He's not with the tissue culture concept. Well, that's business. Now I mean, in order to be able to bud year round, you have to have a infrastructure, you need to have light versus.
Well, we've got that, but there are possibly some other issues. Maybe people might want to offer some comment on perceived other needs. You know, I don't know exactly what they would be. You know, I mean, I can certainly think of some things from a breeder's perspective. You know, the wider range is bigger. And the rootstock gives us more tools to work with. I personally do not see any burgeoning disease issues that I think are important enough to make a huge major change in the research program. So my colleagues may differ in their opinion on that. And I think we know what we're up against. I can't rule out something new coming, but you also can't say what it's going to be until it gets here. Does anybody else see anything else that's impacts here? You know, I can attempt to summarize. You know, we obviously have a great difficulty in trying to make a new piece of material that requires what is a comparatively new and unique propagation method, crowbarring that into a system that was not designed to propagate that way. And I understand. You guys have been doing a great job of doing seed propagated rootstocks for a long, long time. You are where you are. You can't move from where you are. And you know, changing everything over to a greenhouse environment, you might want to move south before you do that. That's all I can say. You know, we could have nurseries located somewhere else, but it's not happening. Getting somebody new to get in, or somebody to vertically integrate, and open up a branch office, so to speak, and perhaps in an area where it could be more easily done. That's a possibility. I don't know what else to offer. You commented though about the cold hardiness. And one thing I just want to say is back when we were initially testing MP29 prior to its release, I was sending you material in the fall, you know, along with the seed that I sent out to test my line. I also sent you material usually in February, only on the clonal lines. I sent you clonal lines around Thanksgiving time, and I sent you clonal lines in February. Now these were small rooted cuttings that I had grown the previous. I took them softwood cuttings in June the previous year. At first, I defoliated them and put them in the cooler for about 6 weeks before I sent them to you. And after I did that for about, I I don't know, I think it was like 4 or 5 years. I wasn't seeing any losses when I came up the following May to inspect all the materials that she had grown off for me. So as I approached release, I thought, well, let's try something a little different. So I cut the leaves off them the day before they were shipped to you out of the greenhouse. Now they had gotten the message, but they hadn't completely foliated. I mean, they knew they said a terminal bud now. You've never suffered any winter losses in any of the material that I ever sent you. And this is why I suggested, I think more than once, you consider planting your materials just as you're cutting out in the fall. Get them from your propagators and put them out in the fall so that they can have an opportunity to break in the spring, at the same time as your seedlings come up. I would have to think this would have at least a month of your growing season. That's just one specific suggestion that I would make that I think needs to be tried before you, shall we say, give up. You know, I think that would afford you an opportunity to get back into a 1 year growing cycle, conceivably. Now, you may call me in June of the first year you do this and say, you can come up or I can send you a photograph of this 2 inch tall or whatever. You know, it's a dead loss. But, you know, there are a few suggestions like that. You know, converting over to a greenhouse system offers some incredible flexibility and possibilities, and it's a trade-off with a lot of other issues. But being able to plant trees out of an operation practically year-round both affords the producer an opportunity to not have to do these in waves, which is what Scotty's dealing with too. If they got to provide the starting material all at once every year, boy, that's hard. But if they can send it out several times in smaller allotments, it makes everything a lot easier. Somewhat. It even affords the opportunity to do a little bit of training on the trees. Now you're transplanting not a bare rooted tree, which basically in peach means you have to cut it back. It will not grow right because of the imbalance, I think, between the root system and the cyanide. When you plant it, if you don't cut it back, it just don't grow properly. But if you can plant it basically an intact tree and nurse it, you know, through that the conversion, if you will, you know, having irrigation available, you could plant virtually any time of year. You can't plant a growing tree, obviously, in the winter up here in middle Georgia, but it gives you a lot more flexibility. It affords you the opportunity even to plant during the summer conceivably. So I'm just saying, there are other possibilities that we really haven't really explored. There are issues with any of this. You know, Jose talked about spider mites. I guarantee you, if you try and grow plants in a greenhouse during the summer, spider mites are going to be your number one problem. Yes, it's a real serious issue. You can't believe how much damage they'll do. And there's other things too. And, if you're budding high chill wood on the rootstocks in a low chill environment, you cannot let them go dormant, or you're going to have to find some way to give them a shift their winter growing. You see what happens if you don't. Anyway, there are other problems that are introduced with every solution, but a lot of these are at least manageable in theory. But at what cost? Do we need an economic analysis? Do we need somebody to try and tear this thing apart and figure out where the costs are, and then decide, you know, there's a limit on how much you can pay for a tree. Okay? But where is that limit and what actually influences that? If you're saddled with, you know, family-owned land that you are committed to growing peaches on, spending your family for several generations, and it's loaded up in Arnold area short life, your need for a tree, your willingness to pay for a tree that'll live there is different from somebody who's on essentially a virgin site and almost any root site. They go back to level or health rate, may be really happy for maybe a generation or two. So, you know, what are your needs? What are your trade-offs? What other crops could you grow in that land that would make peaches, you know, an inferior crop for it? Do we need an economic analysis to look at this and try and break this thing down and decide where the trade-offs are and, you know, where the thresholds are for action or inaction? I don't know what else to really add at this point in time. Still got 15 minutes. Are there any questions, thoughts? Anybody? Okay.
You were talking about the fall.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we did with Clemson. And I may have misspoke earlier when I said that the freeze out and die. Because we did do tests where we put them in the ground in the fall in all different months, but ones that are put out earlier don't seem to really take off and start growing till the same time as the ones that are in the fall. I mean, in the
They're
spring.
planted in the spring.
You know, when they reach a certain point, they start growing. It doesn't seem to matter if we're planting in November, December, January, or the end of February, or the first of March, they take off and start growing.
Well, see, part of the reason I suggested that is because in my experience, we would root our cuttings in June, and instead of holding them in the greenhouse through the winter and planting them out in the spring, we started planting them in the fall, and they would break much. Well, we get into the nursery earlier. We can't get into the nursery as early as they would break naturally out there. So for us, they would break very early. But anything that was already standing out there. Okay. Okay. And that would play into another observation we had made that one of the issues with NP29 is heat. It's the okra of the rootstock family, as far as I'm concerned. It will not grow in cold weather. It doesn't want to. And I've often wondered, I don't know why it's like that, because none of the parents ever came from a cold climate. Just an observation. Yeah, I think it's sensitive, and how and why exactly, I don't know. What could you do about it? Could you, I don't know, mulch or something like that, in a cold environment? But heating the soil is not something that's easy to do. But it'd be much easier to cool it by mulching it in the spring, so on and so forth. And water is another issue with it. And anybody who suffered losses on MP29, first thing I'd ask you about is it dry when you planted them, and was it dry shortly afterwards? It does not like drought. It's waterlogging tolerant. It is not drought intolerant. And when we talk about tree losses on establishment, one of the things we noticed early on when we started setting up plots with it was we were suffering 8 to 10, sometimes 12% tree losses in our plots. And just in MP29, I'm used to having about 2% tree losses in the trials I put out. This is a little more than 1 tree an acre if you were putting out standard orchard. Only thing we changed, baby them. Take them to the field and water them, and make darn sure they don't get drowned out before they get established. At least a few weeks. Don't let them suffer from drought. Just care and handling of MP29 is just a minor point. Just so you know. I see consistent problems with it when those things are ignored. Well, I've talked enough. You've heard enough from me. We got 15 minutes left. Anybody wants to talk about the weather or the upcoming Georgia game? I don't know. Whatever. All right. Anyway, I appreciate your attention. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to talk about stuff.
Well, we do have one more presentation today. Let me go ahead and get it ready. Well, 2 more, same presenter though. Okay, that's what I was looking for you. I was like, oh goodness, what do I do here? Okay. Here. I think so, if you don't mind. Whatever you. Yeah, we're gonna get it to full screen.
Okay, all right, I'll let him know. Okay.
Okay, Ms. Kay Rensel is the executive director for the National Peach Council. For those of you who don't know her, she's going to give us an update on the marketing situation and important information of how things went last year. I think she's going to give some other clarifications on that. So, where's my?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me here. especially given the fact that a family at home texted me this morning photographs that they had received 6 inches of fresh snow. So I am grateful to be in Savannah this afternoon, and maybe for another 24 hours or so. It certainly is great. What I'm going to do is share with you what we did and took a look at, and that's looking towards 2022. But to do that, we have to look back at 2021. And if there are, respectfully, I need to ask if there's any media or press in the room. You are welcome to stay. However, we respectfully request that you not report the information that we're sharing. This is the first time this information is being shared with industry members, and we think it's important for them to be able to take the information we're sharing and be able to use it as a potential roadmap for them as they move forward. So with that, this is probably our 6th or 7th year that we've been doing this for you. And we're taking a look at the trends and opportunities for the peach industry as we move forward. There's 3 major areas that we're going to cover, and that's today's consumer, the marketplace review, and then opportunities. So let's take a quick look at what today's consumer and who today's consumer really is. Of course, this individual has evolved throughout the pandemic. As we all know, the whole marketplace has changed, and nobody knows that better than you, the people who have produced and have had to market peaches in the last 2 years. I have chosen the source of Accenture as a source of looking at consumer trends. Whether you rely just on these numbers or you look at all of the other consumer trends that have been reported out there, it's all relative. So let me just put that out there to start with it. But there's a multitude of consumer research that has been done. And 50% of today's consumers are rethinking their personal purpose and evaluating what's really, I know it's misstated there, but what's really important to them in life. And trust me, I found a few other mistakes. I apologize, but they will be corrected in the final presentation that we make available to all of you. So, that's 50% of today's consumers. And then you add to that 52% of the consumers, not necessarily compounding on top of that, just independently, realize that they need to focus on others more than themselves. So where that really leads us is that we've seen a lot of changes in today's buying habits. And something we'll talk about as we go through here. They're probably here to stay in some way, shape, or form, whether it is what we have today or a modification of it, but it's here to stay. And they're creating enormous opportunities for companies that respond by resetting their strategies and setting new standards for meeting and exceeding expectations. So if you look at that pie chart down there in the bottom a little bit, or circle, what you'll see is 50% of today's consumers now identify as a reimagined consumer. And I went, oh, that's really interesting. What's a reimagined consumer? And then as you go through it and you delve into this a little more, probably where all of us are to a certain degree as well. This reimagined consumer has no real demographic distinctions. So it's not male, female. It's not based on race. It's not based on demographics with regard to income, anything like that. Basically what it is that their values have changed. And with their values changing, thus their purchasing patterns change. You can see that 72% of the reimagined consumers expect companies they're doing business with to understand and address how their needs and objectives change during the times of disruption. And then 50% of the reimagined consumers also say that many companies disappointed them. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but we want to make sure that your company and us as an industry are not in that disappointing arena. And we also want to make sure that we can meet their expectations. So if you take a quick look at this one, this is who those new motivators are. The bar chart shows you on left, the reimagined consumers versus the traditional consumers there on the right. Long driving and what will forever be important is price and quality. And I can't state that enough. Price and quality. They are the ones that will remain strong. But you can see how those numbers have shifted from even the traditional consumers to today's reimagined consumers. And then you look at those 5 major areas and the shifts that have occurred within ease and convenience, service and personal care, trust and reputation, which has increased with the reimagined consumer. Product origin, again, that's very important now to consumers. That one seems to shift some, but it certainly is coming up very strong as people have lived through the pandemic, and health and safety there on the bottom. So these are just a shift of some things, but they may be things that we can capitalize on as an industry. So let's take a look at these. From a health and safety perspective, consumers want to know that, are you keeping me and my neighbors and family safe? Are you as a company being responsible for that? And what about your employees? Are you keeping them safe? That's another level that they're delving into now. Service and personal care. If you do direct marketing at all, or if you reach out, if a consumer reaches out to you, are you remembering them? I know that there's millions and millions of people that could call you, but certainly this is something that they are aware of. And are you making my experience with your brand as personal as you can? With ease and convenience, are you meeting me where I am, blending digital and physical opportunities for delivering your product? Product origin, this is certainly something that we are all very aware of, how your company is impacting the environment. I've long said that farmers and the agriculture industry as a whole have been the greatest environmentalists out there, because without safe water, without safe soil, without safe air, you would cease to exist. You would not be able to provide for your own families. And when I make that statement to many consumers that kind of question me, they're like, yeah, I think you're right. So, I continue to advocate for that, but this is a top of mind for them. And are you local? Are you someone that they can trust right there in the community? This particular graphic, and again, all of this will be available to you. I just need to know that you want it. We'll send it out as the PowerPoint with some notes written in the notes section for you so that you can reference it and delve into it a little bit more when you have more time and are interested in seeing how it might fit in with your marketing plan for 2022. But again, you can see this particular one takes each of those motivations and it shows you the motivator factor for the example of health and safety, offering advice and guidance on health and clean products, and then the willing to switch or if discontinued, and then also the willingness to pay to retain. So this is the consumer perception here on what they're willing to do in each of these 5 major categories. Again, this is very global. It may not be something that is specific to your operation, but it's certainly something that we need to keep an eye on as we look at who the consumer is and purchasing peaches. This one's may come, I don't know if it's really that legible up there, but this is a matrix that they set up as to whether a consumer will stay, whether they will not pay more, whether they will pay more, or whether they're willing to leave purchasing of any goods or services that you have to offer. So I'm sure you're familiar with these types of graphics. Up in the upper left-hand corner is the re-engineer thought process of experiences consumers think worth switching to retain, but not worth paying extra to retain. So you have to figure out, where your company fits in here. And then in the upper right-hand corner, the experiences consumers think worth switching provider and paying more. And that's the reimagine. That's the consumer now that's kind of driving the marketplace. And then down in the lower left, you have the rethink. The rethinking experiences consumers think not worth switching providers for or for paying more for. There's still a lot of those out there as well. But, again, we have to know who our audience is. And then finally, the recalibrate segment of it. And that's the experiences consumers think worth paying extra to retain, but not worth switching providers to retain. So again, it's a more in-depth look at that consumer and trying to figure out where the peaches are going and who's buying them and what your marketplace is. So let's take a look at the marketplace. As I indicated before, this is something we've been doing for you for a number of years, taking a look at Nielsen sales data. This Nielsen sales data is based on all retail outlets, and I specifically brought my notes up here, so if this comes up, I can answer it. I'm just going to put it on the table to start with. Nielsen measures across all national outlet markets, including food and grocery, drugstores, mass merchandisers, Walmart, club stores, dollar stores, and military, the military decas, the defense, right offhand, I'm just drawing a blank on what they're called. I know what they're called, but so this now includes Walmart data, which there have been some prior years where we did not include Walmart with this. So taking a look at this, we looked at 25 single weeks of sales data in the marketplace. This is not your data. This is not what you sold. It's not what any marketing service sold. This is what the consumer scanned across at the register when they went to buy. And we looked at the peach category from the end of April through the beginning of October. Nielsen divides the country into 9 different regions. The highest region for peaches is the South Atlantic region over there. When you look at it, when it comes to sales dollars and units sold in 2021. That is followed then by the Pacific region and then the Mid-Atlantic region. Those are the 3 high dollar volume regions of the country, and they account for 50% of all the dollar volume of peaches sold in 2021. Then you look at the yellow regions, the medium dollar volume, which are the West, South, Central, ranking the highest in dollar sales, then the East, North, Central region, and then the mountain regions. Those 3 regions combined account for 29% of dollar volume in 2021. And then finally, you look at the low dollar volume regions being West, North, Central, New England, and East, South, Central. And they account for almost 19% of the dollar volume. Granted, some of this is driven by population distribution across the country. There's no question about that. You look at some of the low areas, it's also driven by the economic base of the consumer within each of those regions. So you see, while we have focused and identified the regions based on dollar volume, we have also identified the units, and that's in equivalized pounds that you see on the chart. So for example, South Atlantic region, which you all live in and produce in, you can see the regions down there, or the units at the bottom are basically almost 21% of the peaches sold across the country in terms of the pounds have been sold here in the South Atlantic region. All right. If you have questions along the way, stick your hand up and let me know. Then what we did is we took a look at various measures of all of that data by each of these regions. So let's take a look. This is the dollars and percent change by month in the total US. And what we're doing is we're comparing the blue bar, which is 2021, versus the orange bar, which is 2020. And then you see the percent change identified there across the top. This is, again, dollars and percent change by month for the total US. Now, my question is, what region would you like to look at to compare this? Do you have any interest in a specific region? Okay, we'll just go on, because I already did this for you. But I have all 9 regions compared. Up in the upper left-hand corner is the total US, and you may not be able to read that very well because it is very small. But we have put it on the same page for you as the South Atlantic region. We started at the top with the highest regions of dollar sales and unit volumes, and we're now looking at comparing what happened in the Mid-Atlantic region, the South Atlantic region. I call it the Southeast, but that's not what Nielsen refers to it as. So you can see that from the standpoint of where we are in the South Atlantic region, the trend pretty much mirrored what happened nationally. To a certain degree, it's not a huge surprise because in this region, you are the highest region. It is kind of going to drive the US total and the trends themselves. So again, you can see what happened. We were up in dollars, and we were trending similarly with the percentage change over the previous year. Up in dollars had a lot to do with the sheer volume of peaches you all had to market. You can see that the Pacific region has a similar trend to it. And the Mid-Atlantic region, again, a similar trend. So we went through all of these. We have done every region for you so that you can see, and we make this trusty map, which I have right here, but it's in the beginning of the presentation. We have this available for you as well, so that you can look at the regions and see where things are and what states are involved in each of the regions. For example, this Mid-Atlantic region, they identify as New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Everything south of that along the East Coast is that South Atlantic region. These have been placed in order of their dollar sales as we presented them to you on the US map. So the next region would be the South or West South Central region. Again, looking at dollar volume and percent change. Very similar. A couple states in Southwest Central. You have Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas. I should probably have listed those for you, and maybe that's what I'll do in each of these graphics so that it saves you some work and time as well. Then we have the East North Central region, and that would be, it's all covered up by my words, but it would be Michigan, geography, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. Sorry. It's there. It's just not there right off the top of my head sometimes. The mountain region, and that's everything between Minnesota and the Rocky Mountains. Okay, so that's North Dakota, South Dakota, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Idaho, all of those states in that region. Interestingly enough, you see how this region is slightly different? But this is one of those that drops down, that didn't have as big a dollar volume and unit impact, but yet you can see how that has changed within this region in terms of comparing it to the US total. And then you shift to the three regions that are smaller and did not have quite the impact. The West North Central region, which would be all of those in between there. Pardon me? Washington State is considered part of the Pacific region. Yeah, yeah. This is Wisconsin, in through that area. I may have misstated the mountain region, and I do apologize. New England, not surprising though, New England had numbers that mirrored the US, probably due to population. And then South or East South Central. East South Central is Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. So one of the things I would say is, due to proximity, again, this remains as a very viable region for you in terms of development if you have the resources and want to make the investment in that region of the country. Okay, we spent a lot of time on that, but I want to show you what else is in this information for you. We took the same approach and we looked at units this year versus last year. Units meaning pounds of peaches sold, and then the percent change every month. You can see what happened here. The colors don't change. The blue is 2021, the orange is 2020, and this is for total US. And then we did the same thing for you by region. Okay? You can see that our pounds were down in the months of June, July, up slightly in August, and up significantly in September. This would really be important if you are selling goods and services that you know you can push this many cases out every month, at week, whatever it is during the year. With our industry, we recognize that the weather and lots of growing factors play into when the crop is harvested. Therefore, that's why you see some of those spikes, but I can't say that that's 100% of what it is. So again, we've done the same thing for you by every region, so you have this information. I'm looking here, how am I doing on time? I'm good on time? Okay. So if there's a region here that you want to sit, if you say, Kate, go back to that, we can do that. It's not a hard thing to do. Mountain region, again, this is on units. This is not on dollar volume. And the average selling price, this is on strictly on units. The New England region itself, and then the East South Central region. Certainly some opportunities there for us. But overall, you can see that the trends were pretty much the same in every region across the country. Again, a lot of that has to do with when your crop came into the marketplace. Then we looked at the 4-week average price and the percent change this year versus last year. And these are some of the things that we may want to focus on a little bit more as you look at it. Again, you're not looking week for week in terms of exactly when things happened, but certainly trends worth looking at. This is your average unit price, so that's price per pound, each month in May, June, July, August, and September nationally. And you can see what happened here. The first thing I'll say to you is, I know that these are not the prices you sold your peaches for. I would love for you to be able to get these prices. I would love for that. But you just need to be aware that this is where they are. This is what's being reported. Because one of the things we're going to look at next is promotional dollars that you spent against this. So When you look at the promotional dollars you're spending versus what is showing here on these slides with average selling price, are you getting back what you're expecting to? Are you moving the peaches that you're expecting to sell? I can't answer that. I'm only here to help you try to understand what's happening out in the marketplace, but we are here to help in any way we can. So here's what happened in the South Atlantic region in comparison with the US, the average selling prices. Again, your South Atlantic region only looks at 2021 versus 2020. We did not overlay the national trend in there. And if that's something you want to see, please just let me know. I believe the analyst told me we can pull that in there. So we'll do our best to meet your needs. This is the Pacific region at California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii. I'll take the Hawaii marketplace if anyone wants to give it to me. Then there's the Mid-Atlantic region, and you can see Mid-Atlantic took it on the chin in August. Probably had to do with the volume of sales and the peaches out there as well. So certainly something that didn't help the industry much when you see almost an 8% decline in pricing from one year to the other. We did this West South Central region. Again, decent numbers, kind of following the national trend. The East North Central region, that one really took off. That was a little bit of a surprise to me when we went in and looked at the data on this one. And then the mountain region. This typically is a region where they do a lot more regionalized marketing of the peaches, especially those coming out of the Colorado area. So this one was not a huge surprise to me personally. It may be to you, but you can certainly see what happened there. And then West North Central, New England, again, New England and the Mid-Atlantic regions really kind of bottomed out in August and September. And then you look at the East South Central region. So that, okay, I'll keep going. I forgot I started early. I'm sorry. I did, and I promise I'll try to get, sorry about that, folks. Okay, so we'll quickly look now. These are the promoted dollars, and this is where I was talking about as we started looking at the average selling price. These are the promoted dollars and average promoted price by month, May through September. So you can see what the promoted dollars are there. You see the red line is any promoted price in 2021. The blue line across the top of the bars there is any promoted price in 2022. So you see in 2021, we were well above where we were in 2020. I keep wanting to say 2022, I'm sorry. But just be aware, I know the whole marketplace was different. It's hard to compare these 2 years because just the whole shift and the impact of COVID and the pandemic, but it's still worth looking at. You need to know what's happening out there. And you could see, obviously, with more peaches last year than in 2020, we had to promote a little bit heavier. This is kind of the same information expressed to you in a bar chart that shows it a little more graphically for you. Again, it's just the same information. It's identified by the weeks across the bottom. And you can see out there in August and September how much the blue for 2021 spiked over 2020. I had to really think about that one. The bottom line to all of this, at least on a national level, is that during the time frame, and I apologize, I happen to have the cutoff of the dotted line over here on the right-hand side, and that's where the orange and the blue line intersect one another. During this time period, promoted dollars averaged 70% of the dollar sales in 2021. So 70% of what you sold during the main time frame of the year was sold on promotional dollars. Maybe you had to do it. Was it the right promotional level? Only you can answer that for your operation, but my job is to show you what the trends are and what was happening. And then again, we did this for each of the regions. Yep, here, Mountain Region is first. That was one of my accidents. But just to show you, we did do this for each region for you, looking at promotional dollars. So I'm going to fast forward through this unless you want me to spend time on it here. And we're going to look at the opportunities that are out there for us. Because I know there's lots of peaches in the orchard. There's lots of trees in the orchards right now. Not a lot of peaches yet that we're aware of. So let's look at some of the opportunities. Branded peaches. We've been talking to you about branded peaches for a number of years. The opportunity to brand your peach allows the consumer to connect with you, the producer. So if there's a way for you to brand your peaches at the consumer level, certainly something that would be advantageous to you. It is also a growing trend throughout produce. So it's not just peaches, it's everybody embracing this branding and identifying their brand with the consumer. But again, you've got to deliver quality with that product because they will remember you as the brand. So that one's there. Some of the changes to the consumer buying patterns and habits that you want to consider, they're very much health conscious, more health conscious now than they were before. A lot of people focused on their health throughout the pandemic. Certainly something that is going to be key moving forward. We don't have a lot in terms of, being able to tout. We have A, B, C, D, and all of these things that are really positive for peaches. It's more like what we don't have that makes them very nutritious for you. But we are delving into a study to find some older test data about there are healthy benefits to eating peaches, and we want to make sure that we make that information available to you. We also, some of the things that we're looking for are ideas and recipes. If you're doing a branded program and you're packing your peaches in bags, please be sure to consider something like that, or definitely put your website or a link where they can go to get information. That's probably more critical than anything else. There are a lot of opportunities with the prepared meals and menus options out there. Don't forget about these people. They'll use your product, ship it out with the various packaged meal programs that are out there. Certainly an opportunity for you. And that can also lead into the next one, which is developing partnerships where it's a win-win, because if you're selling product in an area, you're increasing your brand, but also if you're pairing it in the grocery store with ingredients and seasonings and cooking equipment, it becomes a win-win for you and the retailer because they're going to sell more in the end. And obviously, all of the retail trade has gone to a lot of their online programs. I certainly encourage you, if you have not already done so, to investigate what online programs your retailers offer to you, the supplier, the produce supplier, that reach right through to the consumer. One of the hardest challenges we face is the fact that a consumer is not in the store smelling the peaches, picking up the peaches, seeing the peaches. We're not necessarily on their weekly grocery list. We'd like to be, and we can work towards that. But right now, we need to make sure that we take advantage of those opportunities. And then finally, I put up here support and participate and support the USDA Fresh Peach Purchase Program, which is under development. With several industry members and also with members of USDA and myself, met personally with people at commodity procurement back in the beginning of November. And we laid out the scenario that exists for the industry, and that is we have a lot of peaches in the ground. There's been a tremendous shift in consumer purchasing. There's been a tremendous shift and impact of the tariffs and the way that impacts our competitive product on the shelf, specifically grapes, cherries, and some of those. So what we want to do is make sure that we are prepared to say to them, we need assistance, and here's a program that we think might work. And the reason I share this with you is we, the Peach Council, did an independent survey of producers across the country to find out who participated in the Farm to Families Food Box program in 2020. And I was quite amazed. I'll just tell you, the estimated sales were a minimum of 32 million pounds of peaches that were distributed through the Farm to Families Food Box program. And we actually told USDA when we met with them, we were incredibly grateful because we're not sure what would have happened had we not had access to that program in 2020. And then to have it kind of yanked out from under us and everybody else in 2021, it was quite a shocker. Now there's a proposal in committee right now to bring that back for 2022. I don't know what's going to happen. It's got some strong support, but we'll have to see. In the meantime, the industry is putting together a program that we want to take to USDA in the next 2 weeks to say, follow up to our meeting, here's what we'd like to see. And we're going to ask for a 40 million pound purchase of fresh peaches. They have never purchased fresh peaches before, so this would be a whole new program for them. So, we'll have to see. There may be some hurdles. Understand that we always ask high because you never get what you ask for, but you have to ask in order to even be considered. So I encourage you to follow your email. We'll get information out to you. We are excited about this, but we just need to button it up a little bit more before I can share all of the details with you. When we get it together, we will strongly encourage that you reach out to your congressmen and your senators because they will play key roles we're going to ask them to reach out to USDA to support this program. And those people have a lot that they can offer for us. So that's what I have for you. I hope that we can find some encouraging things for 2022 and all of that. And I would ask that, again, this presentation with all the corrections will be made available to you. We are not going to send it out just yet to the total industry because you've been here. We want to give you the opportunity to have it first. We'll email it out to you, or it may have to be provided through a Dropbox link, just given the size of the presentation. So I know I'm probably over, and I will keep going. I'll hurry through the next one, but any questions on this at all? Okay. Well, it's always a pleasure. Okay, so now what do I need to do here? Let's see. Escape. Okay, we're just going to do a real quick update about what's going on. And oh, I got the same one. No, it's the same one. They must be. Sorry about this, folks. Sometimes technology and I don't always get along. Okay. And oh, down here. Perfect. Okay. Let me just update you quickly on the things that we're doing in Washington, D.C. and the things where we may need your help. When I actually was asked for a title, you see the Washington world of taxes, labor, and so much more, and how they impact the business. Even that has changed some. So let's quickly go through this. Just so you know, there's some key buzzwords in Washington, D.C., and you hear this in every conversation that involves anyone in the current administration. And it's sustainability and it's equity. Those are the buzzwords. And they always start out with that quote there at the bottom. whole of government equity agenda. And it goes on. So everything we do, we have to keep these in mind right now because these are the buzzwords that they're looking for from coming back from the industry members in Washington, D.C. Labor, we know that remains a critical issue for our industry. And it's only compounded now by all the other labor shortages that are out there and everybody else looking for workers. Not that we don't have workers, we just don't have workers that are willing to work. Couple that with the adverse wage rates for 2022. I'm aware of the fact that at least here in Georgia and South Carolina, you're up to $11.99 an hour for your H-2A workers. The only thing I can say is be thankful you're not in California and Washington because theirs are pushing $18 an hour. So we continue to monitor this for you. We continue to be advocates for you, making sure that members of Congress know how important sustainable, steady, reliable workers are to you and your ability to provide food for America and for the world. So know that we are on top of this. We do a lot of it in a coalition work, but we are working on it on your behalf. When it comes to inflation, this is another one. Certainly, we saw it coming. I saw it coming. I'm sure you all did as well. I thought this was interesting. Just in the last 2 weeks, this information was shared with me that these are our producer input costs for fertilizers are up 122% from 2021, and herbicides up 186% from 2021. And that's just 2 areas that you have to deal with. So we're aware of that. And then you couple that with this is what leads to the consumer inflation too, running at 6%. So I'm not sure what to say except that it's going to be a bumpy road ahead and we're all in it together. So we will continue to be there for you, making sure that if you have issues and concerns, you let us know. But ag industry as a whole continues to share with everyone on the Hill and in the administration what the impact is. When I titled the presentation, taxes were a huge issue to us. We were very concerned about the STEP Act and foreign families and taxes. This has gone from one of the top things that being discussed in Washington, D.C. to well off, I shouldn't say off the radar screen because it's still there. But we understand the impact that it would have on you and your family farms out there. So we will continue to monitor this for you. I can tell you that Senator John Boozman from Arkansas has been a huge advocate for agriculture, and he's pulled a lot of us together. We've had a lot of meetings with him and his staff, and he is able to at least get the message out there to other colleagues of his. So again, it's been very beneficial to have a leader in Congress like him. Supply chain. Don't need to tell you anything you don't already know. I do participate in regular supply chain coalition conversations. We continue to express every time we're on the call the needs that the industry has. So we have signed on to numerous congressional and administration letters, even a letter that has been sent to the president and staff at the various agencies. So just know that we're on it for you. We'll do what we can, again, done in the coalition realm so that we're not the only people out there. Climate change, again, a top focus of this administration. Currently, they're looking at the ag water use regulations, and there's been some hearings set for those in February 14th and February 25th. These particular ag water hearings deal with the way the water is used in your operation, and then like if you run a packing line and you're using the water there, and then the use of that water out into your orchards for irrigation. So we're going to get into that a little bit more, me and I welcome any insights and inputs you all have. If you'd like, we will be also making comment on the record, meaning that we would submit comments, probably not participating as an oral presentation, just providing written comment for the record that can be used. So I encourage you to provide any feedback as you read these regulations that come out to do that. And there's also talk that they may open the waterways of the U.S. ruling again, because it was never formally, it just goes back and forth administration to administration. So we may have that one to deal with coming down the road too. But conservation is a huge issue with this, excuse me, climate change and conservation are the issues with the administration as well. And they should be, but as I've shared with you, you all are the best at it. And then finally, with regard to COVID, we've briefly talked about the Farm to Families Food Box program and the impact there. We also continue to monitor what's going on from a regulatory standpoint, mandatory vaccines, not so much by state, more on a national level. So we continue to follow this. I know it's at the Supreme Court now, today, probably tomorrow. We expect a ruling sometime in the next few days. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but sometimes I've been right, sometimes I've been wrong. So once again, my crystal ball reading is not very good, but know that we are working on your behalf, trying to make sure that we follow this for you. And then finally, the Farm Bill's coming up. It seems like it's forever away, but it's only next year. So these are the topics that are covered in the Farm Bill, some of which we benefit from immensely with regard to the Specialty Crop Research Initiative, the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, the various plant, pest, and disease management and disaster prevention, the National Clean Plant Network, as was addressed earlier, nutrition, and organics. So it's very important for us to provide insight and information to them on these topics. So we will do that through a coalition as well. So that's what I have for you. It's always exciting times in Washington. So I always say it's flexibility is where it's at, and we try to do that. So again, contact information is here. If you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always here for you and look forward to working for you again. And please come to tomorrow afternoon's business meeting. I promise it's not going to be half an hour in length, but I do need you to be here. We have some important business to take care of. And also I wanted to remind you, we have a table out here in the concourse area. We have a lot of free banners. They are left over from one of those specialty crop programs. Please take them, they're free. If it helps you sell peaches, if it helps create more awareness in your office about peaches, please take them because they are not going to Pennsylvania with me. So thank you very much.
I do have one quick class announcement. Tomorrow, we're having a very important meeting at noon. There's a complimentary lunch for all peach growers. It'll be in room 205 or 206. And we need input from growers. So please, if you can make it, please try to get to that. The trade show will be open in the morning, tomorrow morning from 9 to 2. Before that, are there any other announcements for the good of the group? There's evaluations on the side. If you didn't get your pesticide things checked, they should have ran it. It should have beeped the machine on you. You need to go see the person at the educational desk to make sure you get credit for being here today. With that, I appreciate all of y'all being here. Take care. Oh, you weren't here the whole thing, or just completely? It was working fine, and then we put Greg Reaper on one, and the whole thing, it wasn't his fault. But anyway, it just stopped working. The whole thing. Did you want me to go ahead and delete your presentation?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Thank you. Just, yeah, normally we like the rest of them, I'll put on a desk that thing to turn into. So this one's yours here.
Yeah,
and
that's
this
the
one's
most
yours.
important. Well, this one is the most important one. But
Yeah, delete that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's got all the nuances.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
But we're done. And really, it was less than 5 minutes on the run, so it really wasn't that big a deal. It felt like 30 minutes there, but it was really like 5 minutes,